Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you're watching second and final part of What If Kid Naruto was protected by Hinata from shadows. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
When Naruto's desperate gaze met hers, she snapped her eyes up to meet his, and as his hand reached up to wipe at her cheek, she saw tears streaming down her cheek. Hinata-chan, how are you? Naruto gently wiped away her tears with his thumb before asking. Hinata blinked, then lowered her head in shame. She had to be Naruto-kun's pillar, she had to be strong, and she was displaying weakness in front of him, and that was unacceptable. You can talk to me, Hinata-chan. His hesitant expression caught her attention again, and he appeared almost uneasy. I'm not really sure how to console people. When I was feeling down, the old man would usually just give me a hug. I tried that, but you still seemed upset. I apologize, but I'm not very helpful with these things. With admiration in her eyes, Hinata watched him fidget with her pillow and smooth out his shirt where he believed she lay. She also felt a warmth that began in her stomach and gradually spread throughout her body. It was still a pleasant, upbeat feeling, but it was different from the one she got when Naruto touched her hand, held her as he was now, praised her, and told her she was the most important person in his life. Now that this sensation had a name, Hinata's face began to flush. She understood what he meant to her and how deeply she loved him. Sasuke was writhing on the bed, his eyes screwed shut with pain, when a scream tore through the air, swiftly dragging Hinata from her private thoughts. Naruto immediately threw himself over, trying to shake Sasuke awake. Ninha! Itachi! His fists clenched tightly as he glared at the sheets beneath him, clenching his teeth. Sasuke screamed, bolting upright, eyes wide and filled with righteous fury. He whipped his head around before reality set in and he realized where he was. Itachi, why did you do this? Why did you take everything away from me? When a hand landed on his shoulder, Sasuke's head jerked up, and he traced the offending appendage to discover Naruto staring at him gravely. With a sorrowful expression, Naruto said, Sasuke, I'm sorry. When he saw the remorseful boy sitting up in bed with a slight glare at Naruto, Sasuke's angry expression changed to one of surprise. He stared at Hinata until he caught her eye, wanting someone to understand the pain he had endured. As he stared at her with wide, anguished eyes, she understood his message and nodded, her eyes flashing to Naruto. Sasuke furrowed his brow and looked down, his eyes watering. Hinata had seen Naruto die, and he had repeatedly endured his parents' murder. However, something was bothering him. The door to their room opened, and the Hokage stood on the other side, surrounded by nurses who appeared very concerned, and he sighed. He had been on his way home last night when Itachi had shown up, a little bloodstained in front of him, and, although he had been incensed, he had finally come to understand why Danzo had gone to such lengths to prevent an uprising of the Uchiha clan, which would not stop him from exacting revenge on the man who so flagrantly disregarded his position as Hokage, but that would have to wait. He had to send Anbu to gather the clan's bodies, secret scrolls, and weapons, and begin recording them all, as well as official forms designating Itachi as a missing nin. Would it be okay if I entered? He spoke softly, smiling kindly at the three kids. Sasuke gave him a blank stare, then glanced at the brunette across from him. She nodded, and he shifted the gesture to the elderly Hokage. Hiruzen grinned his gratitude and shuffled in, shutting the door behind him in spite of the nurse's objections. His expression immediately took on the most solemn expression, and he gave the young Uchiha a pitying glance. Sasuke-kun. Hiruzen began, moving to the foot of his bed, I want to express my sincere regret for what has transpired. As soon as we learned of the incident, we sent Anbu to the scene to look into it and try to find survivors or apprehend Itachi. Regretfully, I can only offer bad news regarding those two circumstances. With no family left, no one left, Sasuke clutched his blankets tightly, his eyes serving as windows to his anger and sorrow. It is most fortunate that he did not continue it further, he added. From what we can tell, he used an advanced genjutsu on both you and Hinata-san when you confronted him. Both of you experienced some mental harm, but if you had been involved for a longer period of time, your mental health would have undoubtedly suffered even more, possibly to the point where your personalities would have changed negatively. When Naruto appeared to be about to yell in protest, he continued, and they are currently looking into the Uchiha scrolls about what your brother dubbed Tsukiyomi for lasting effects. Yamanaka went into your memories when you reported to the hospital. It was standard procedure, Naruto. Don't give me that look. Luckily, Yuhi Kurenai, our top genjutsu expert, has already discussed it with Itachi. It seems to transport you to a different reality that strains your mind and makes a moment seem like a day. She tells me that if someone goes through the entire ordeal, it can leave someone quite broken. He concluded, giving the two kids a half smile. It seems like you both somehow managed to escape its power sooner than you should have. Hinata watched the Sandaime expressionlessly, understanding how someone could lose themselves there if she had been exposed to Naruto's death for a longer period of time than she had already. Hiruzen, who had visited the Hyuga estate and seen Hinata on multiple occasions, but not in a few months, frowned slightly as he watched her maintain a thoughtful gaze. She appeared to him to be different now. He would have to investigate further. He turned back to Sasuke and saw him struggling with something. He looked up at the old man with wide, scared eyes and said weakly, "Hokage. Sama, what will I do now? I don't have any family," he said, his face darkening as he looked down, except him. That look, which reminded Hiruzen of the time his student's parents had passed away, was one that sought power at all costs in order to achieve the desired outcome. Hiruzen started to say something, but someone else had already said it. The Uchiha turned to face Naruto as he said, "Hey, Sasuke, you know, I don't have any family either. But you know, I still have you guys." He half smiled at his friend, but Sasuke didn't return the smile. With a harsh tone and anger in his voice, he stated, "It's not the same. I had a family, including my father, mother, and brother, and now they're all gone." He yelled and violently punched the bed. Naruto remained quiet for a while before continuing. "It's true that I have no idea what it's like to have parents, but I believe I can experience what it's like to have a brother," he concluded with passion, a fire burning in his eyes as he looked down defiantly at Sasuke, who appeared surprised. What is the intended meaning of that? His anger gave way to bewilderment as he asked. "Well, for the past few months, hanging out with you, I feel like you're the closest thing to a brother I'll get, you know," Naruto said with a smile and a fist to the boy with the black hair. Sasuke just stared at Naruto without saying anything or blinking, and then, very slowly, a tiny smile came to his face. He looked at his hands and said to himself, "You and me, brothers, huh?" It was true that he had become close to Naruto and Hinata and spent more time with them than with his own parents or brother, but they weren't necessarily at fault because his father was the clan's leader and his mother was there to help balance his father's more assertive and aggressive behavior, and Itachi was. He interrupted himself. Itachi was no longer to be cherished. He was a curse to Sasuke, who would do everything in his power to grow stronger in order to kill him and exact revenge on his family one day. Sasuke gave Naruto the best smile he could manage at the time, which turned into a smirk, and nodded. He slammed Naruto's fist against his own and said, "I guess we are kind of brothers, aren't we? In that case, you need to help your brother get strong." His face darkened, and Naruto paled slightly when he saw how much hatred Sasuke had conjured up in his features. "I need to kill Itachi one day, and I'll need all the strength I can get," he said. On the one hand, Hiruzen was happy to see that the Uchiha had not gone so far into darkness as to exclude everyone else, and he was happy to see that his surrogate grandson had made such wonderful friends. On the other hand, he was saddened to see Sasuke's response to his brother's unidentified sacrifice and how he was handling his loss. As the Sandaime watched Sasuke playfully punch Naruto in the shoulder, he thought, "Maybe someday you'll find out the truth. Your brother has done more for this village than almost anyone I know. I hope that you do." The old man grinned at the three of them and said, "Well, if that's the case. You all have a week off of classes, since your progress, I dare say, is quite extraordinary." Naruto grinned brightly at the compliment, and Sasuke nodded courteously. Hiruzen observed that Hinata looked down blankly, but he could feel anger behind her eyes. Why? "In any case, I'll inform Ruka of the circumstances," the Sandaime teased, laughing at Naruto's offended expression. "Your friends have a perfectly good excuse because they're bedridden, but you don't. Naruto, don't let your skills dull in your short time off." He walked out of the room after saying, "Have a good day, you three." This gave the nurses a chance to check on their patients. After a little while, Sasuke fell back asleep, giving Naruto and Hinata some much-needed privacy. Naruto pulled a chair up to Hinata's bed and gave the brunette a questioning glance. "Hi Hinata. Chan. What's causing your depressed expression? He prodded at her arm and asked. Hinata jumped a little as she was pulled out of her reverie once more and swore inaudibly. What was that Naruto-kun? I apologize, she asked shyly, embarrassed that she was unaware of her surroundings because of her new crush. You never smile when you're sad, and your smile is the best, Naruto said, furrowing his brows. I asked why you looked so sad. He smiled at her as he spoke. When he said that her smile was the best, Hinata flushed and pressed her index fingers together. But her happiness at his remark was quickly dashed when she remembered her earlier thoughts. How would she ever find a way to discuss what she had witnessed in Itachi's genjutsu, and how profoundly it had affected her? How she felt like a piece of garbage because she couldn't save him, even if it wasn't him. How she was afraid that they would be just as strong as Itachi and that she would lose Naruto. This time, she would actually see that blade pierce his throat, hear his stifled final words, and watch his bright eyes turn to a lifeless gray. When she felt tiny arms envelop her for the second time that day, she realized her cheeks were wet once more and let out a loud cry, asking herself, why? Why was I so weak? Don't, Hinata. Chan. Naruto surprised her by saying loudly. He pierced her with his words, you're not weak at all. You're one of the strongest people I know. She was trying to understand what Naruto was saying while simultaneously reprimanding herself for mimicking his behavior by speaking her thoughts without intending to. How? She uttered while holding his shirt. He was grinning, and she could almost hear it. He squeezed her and continued, because you never give up, and I know I can rely on you. And you kick everyone else's ass constantly. Even if you were beat by Itachi, he's like, one of the best in the village, right? I remember Sasuke saying he was a Chunin or Jonin by our age, right? So there's nothing to feel bad about. We'll keep getting stronger, and by the time we have to fight him or anyone else like him, we'll be able to take them on for sure. Hinata wanted to believe every word he said because it was so certain and confident, however. That tone was also present in the Naruto who had his chest cut open. That was the tone used by the Naruto who had vowed to protect her and had been beheaded. The person whose body was turned into a pin cushion for kunai, the one whose head fell in, the one who was burned to death, all of them spoke with the same assurance as the real Naruto. Despite her desire to believe in herself as much as he did and to accept his words, she was unable to do so. But he was correct about one thing. They would become more powerful. They were forced to. As her father sidestepped her open palm strike and struck back with his own, Hinata clenched her teeth. She was violently thrown to the ground, adding another cut to the many that already covered her body. Her father stood up straight and gave her a worried look. That will be all for today, Hinata. He continued, you have made very good progress, so there will be no need for. She settled into her Juken stance and hissed, again. In a rare display of emotion for the head of the Hyuga clan, his eyebrows went up a little. He looked directly at her and said, Hinata, any additional training will be harmful to you because of your current state. She looked back at him after turning her head and spitting out a glob of mucus. Again. She said again, then hurried on. She went on the attack, hurling quick palm strikes at her father's body as her muscles cried out in protest. It was taking his focus to push them away, but he did it easily. The days of him reprimanding her and sparring at the same time were long gone. If he attempted to speak while they were fighting, she could exploit it. In the hopes that her father would interpret it as a sign of exhaustion, Hinata purposefully overextended her arm slightly. Fortunately for her, he fell for the bait, and she whirled around it, pushing her palm as quickly as she could in the direction of his bare stomach as he launched his counterattack. His years of experience were demonstrated to her in a deft twist of his entire body, which moved his form along her arm to gain momentum as he threw a twin set of palms into her back, knocking her onto her stomach, squashing her victory that had flashed before her eyes. Hinata punched the ground while muttering a curse. She could only go as fast as that, and even with the tactical edge she had gained, it was still too slow, too feeble. She turned to her father and pushed herself to her feet, swaying a little. Again. Sitting by himself in the clearing, Naruto stretched his limbs to their utmost. He sighed as he sat in the middle of the grass after calling forth 5 clones to spar with and defeating them all. Instead of attending class, Iruka had visited his friends a week after they were discharged from the hospital to inform them that they had an extra week off to recover, as long as they engaged in personal training for a few hours each day. Though it was in vain, Naruto had seized the chance to lift his friend's spirits and help them return to the rhythm they had established for themselves. Sasuke had only once shown up to say that he needed some time to himself and not to expect him until they resumed school, and Hinata hadn't been seen since she was discharged from the hospital. Though he didn't know where to find the boy, Naruto would have attempted to train with Shino instead, keeping in mind that he appeared to be amiable enough. As Naruto collapsed back onto the grass, he observed the clouds drifting languidly on the wind. Naruto-san, it is good to see you here. Naruto sat up and grinned as his eyes strayed to the voice. Shino. How did you know I was here? I didn't, the quiet child replied. My family sometimes utilizes this training ground due to the large expanse of forest to further our tracking abilities by attempting to learn a landscape by utilizing our bugs alone. I had let some of my hive loose when they detected you and I decided to greet you. After blinking, Naruto scanned his entire body. Shino adjusted his sunglasses and reassured him, don't worry, my hive has returned to me. Naruto gave a sheepish smile. Ah, that's good. Anyway, I'm glad you're here. As Shino took in the wide smile on the blonde's face, his head tilted slightly to the side. Why is that? Naruto's smile widened. Because I have no one to train with, and since you're here now, you can be my training partner. After a moment of silence, Shino sat down next to Naruto. Where, if I may ask, are Sasuke-san and Hinata-san? Naruto's expression dimmed a little. I don't really know. I know that Sasuke wants some alone time, which is fine, but I haven't seen or heard anything from Hinata since they got out of the hospital. It's really worrying me, you know? Recalling why the three of them had missed classes in recent weeks, Shino gave a solemn nod. The young Uchiha was receiving a lot of sympathy whenever he was spotted because the news of the Uchiha clan massacre had spread like wildfire. In an attempt to console him, every girl in their class looked forward to seeing him return to class each day. It was sort of disgusting to Shino. I'm sorry I cannot say that I have seen Hinata-san as of late. Hopefully everything can return to some sort of normality after you all return to the academy. Shino said, and Naruto nodded. Naruto stretched his shoulder and exclaimed, yeah, that'll be nice. But hey, do you want to train? Because I'm raring to go. After giving it some more thought, Shino shook his head. I'm sorry Naruto-san, but my father has mandated that my training be exclusively with my hive for the day. Since it has not been long since they have integrated with me, I must get more familiar with them so as to direct them with efficiency in battle. However, he continued, noticing the expression on Naruto's face, after our classes tomorrow I would be happy to train with you. Naruto grinned widely at the Aburame as his face brightened. That's awesome. This is kind of like my training area, so you can just meet me here, and if you ever want to train with me and Hinata-chan, and sometimes Sasuke, you can just come here. Shino nodded, his faint smile tucked away in his jacket folds. Before launching himself into the forest, Shino remarked, very well then, I will see you tomorrow, Naruto-san. Grinning, Naruto punched his hand with new energy. Even though his friends were behaving a little oddly, he was sure that they would soon get back to their regular ways. And after that, they would keep trying to get stronger. As he slammed his fist into the final of his shadow clones, Naruto gasped, the flesh rapidly giving way to white smoke. Taking deep breaths, the blonde hit the ground instantly. He sat up after a few moments, smiling cheekily at a familiar spot in the trees and letting out a breath as it slipped from his face. It was getting to him that Hinata hadn't come to train with him for 2 weeks. Before, he was unaware of how much her presence motivated and inspired him to succeed. She had, after all, outperformed everyone in the class and had even volunteered to train alongside him, however, ever since the Uchiha incident. With a distressed expression in his youthful eyes, Naruto observed the passing clouds. Sasuke and Hinata both returned to class, but they were different. Hinata exchanged a lot fewer words with him, so she didn't blush nearly as much as she used to. Oddly, she talked about everything the boy was going through in their few conversations, as though she were still by his side as much as she was. For Naruto, it was depressing despite being, to put it mildly, perplexing. After all, she was his best friend in addition to being his first. To exacerbate the situation, she had ceased training with him. She would frown each time he brought it up to her. It wasn't a natural expression on her face, and he detested it. She would say, her eyes narrowing a little, I can't Naruto-kun. My father and I are training together, please comprehend. And with a nod, he would wish her luck. How was he unable to? Despite their conversations at the hospital, he felt as though he had let her down. Why else would she put herself at such a great distance from him? With Sasuke, not much changed. It appeared that the smile he had given Naruto at the hospital was his final one. Sasuke's once warm onyx eyes now appeared cold and aloof, and he was constantly seen with a permanent frown. Sasuke would always grimace at Naruto when he came up to him, wanting to train with him. The previous time Naruto had begged him to join him, he had said, "I'd rather train alone for now. I have to do it," I said. Overall, Naruto had the impression that his friends had abruptly stopped being his friends. Naruto's thoughts turned to the stoic boy and he thought, at least Shino finds some time to come hang out. Shino had made it a point to train with Naruto once a week, even though he also had a lot of training to do with his clan because of his insect companions. Naruto found that he enjoyed listening to Shino discuss the different insects that roamed the forest around them, even though a large portion of their training was endurance-based, because the Aburame didn't physically condition himself much outside of learning his family's taijutsu. Shino was happy to share with Naruto the particular skills of the more special ones used by the Aburame, and the blonde thought their range of applications was super awesome. Naruto saw him only once a week or so, and their meetings were spaced out. All of this caused Naruto to find himself alone once more, with only physical clones of himself for companionship. As the loneliness set in and his barriers began to fall down, he let out another sigh. He pretended to be calm around most people, but he was actually just as terrified as he had been when he was first expelled from the orphanage. Although he had made a friend, it didn't seem to last. Was being alone his fate? Sasuke and Hinata appeared to have begun to shun him. Would Shino follow suit after learning that Naruto wasn't worth his time? Unusually wet, his eyes lost their usual gleam as he gazed up at the sky, oblivious to the pale eyes that watched him. A year afterward, with a grunt, Naruto's leg made a solid contact with the wood, easily breaking the log's surface. Before launching a vicious roundhouse, he swiftly spun on his heel and withdrew the leg to accelerate. Under the force of the blonde's kick, the top of the log broke and the center of the tree splintered. After exhaling the breath he had been suppressing, Naruto grinned to himself. He'd gotten the feel of close quarters combat and his reaction time had increased tenfold from daily sparring with his clones. He didn't have anything else to practice, but he would have liked to take a break from all the physical training he had done, in addition to the standard weapons training. This had created a pit of dissatisfaction inside of him, and he frequently vented his resentment by appearing a bit too tough and yelling, "You couldn't break me if you tried, punk," at any training posts that dared to offend him. It goes without saying that the logs made up statements were consistently shown to be untrue. Sweating, Naruto shook off his coat and picked up 2 tiny leaves. He quickly made the hand sign to create 100 clones, forcing the leaves onto his palms with a steady stream of chakra. He smiled at his clones, and the sea of orange gave him a smile of his own. He jumped into the battle with just his legs, spinning and slashing out with them to defeat clone after clone. With a particularly vicious knee to the nose, he finished the last one and raised his palms, panting, smiling at the leaves that had not moved a centimeter. Even though he was still unable to call forth any ordinary clones, his control was undoubtedly improving. His eyes quickly became sad as he turned to get his coat before eating. He recalled the times he spent eating constantly with his friends, particularly following a demanding training session. A year later, Hinata and Sasuke were still as far apart as ever, and in an odd way. Though she never trained with him, Hinata had begun to speak to him more frequently and somewhat more like her former self. He occasionally persuaded her to join him for lunch, but she would usually leave in the middle of their meal, saying she was running late for her father's training. During these moments, Naruto was unable to conceal his disappointment and was certain that he had witnessed her appearing equally depressed. He was unable to think about it. Thoughts of Sasuke pushed to the front of his mind, tormenting him with images of his friend, even as he made an effort to suppress his negative thoughts about Hinata's separation from him. Sasuke had become increasingly estranged from everyone, not just Naruto and Hinata. He hardly responded to either the blonde or the brunette, but he didn't despise them outright. Naruto didn't agree with Iruka's attempt to pull him back out because he had withdrawing so deeply into himself. There was nothing Naruto could do to make the boy come out of his shell, not even a little teasing or boasting. Naruto even made an effort to beg his surrogate brother to recall their former relationship. Sasuke's eyes narrowed at what he said, and he angrily told Naruto that he didn't understand the term brother. At his words, Naruto stumbled and gave him a look so agonizing that the ebony-haired Uchiha had to stalk away while muttering a guilty mutter. Since then, Naruto had not made many attempts to rescue Sasuke from his angst, but occasionally he caught Sasuke looking at him guiltily out of the corner of his eye. Somewhere in there, Naruto found comfort in the knowledge that Sasuke still cared, at least a little. With a wave to attract the server's attention, Naruto settled into his customary seat at Ichiraku. Hey, old man, give me 4 bowls of miso pork please. As he began to gather ingredients, Tucci brightly exclaimed, "Of course Naruto. But what is on your mind, dear boy? You only go all out when something bothers you." Naruto grinned. The ramen chef's ability to sense his actual emotions never ceased to astound him. Even though their conversations didn't delve too far into their private lives, he still regarded the elderly man as one of his closest friends. "That's all," Naruto said with a shy smile. "Just missing my friends, that's all. It's alright though, I'm just being selfish is all. I'm sure they have good reasons to be busy all the time, after all." Tucci stirred the noodles and shook his head. "Who are you trying to convince, Naruto-kun? Me? Or yourself?" Unexpectedly, Naruto blinked as he considered the old man's words. When Tucci looked back after a minute of silence, Naruto was grinning calmly. "I think that they have their reasons, and that it'll go back to normal one day." Tucci grinned. "Then it will, Naruto. Just keep believing." As Hinata heard Naruto tell Tucci how he felt, the fissure that had already appeared in her heart widened a bit more. Despite her belief that she should distance herself from Naruto in order to better concentrate on her training, she still felt herself drawn to his side every day, even if he was unaware of it. Pushing him away like she did had killed her. Her father and she trained together in the mornings before their academy classes, right after class, and in the evenings. Her insistence led to the addition of more time in the after-class session, and even the leader of the Hyuga clan was starting to feel the effects of his frequent arguments with his daughter. But every session, Hinata pushed herself to the limit, barely standing when their sparring was over. She had managed to follow Naruto almost every day despite their harsh training, tending to her wounds while keeping an eye on him from a distance. She observed his struggle with the new mindset that she and Sasuke had adopted, as well as his return to a state of partial loneliness. For that, she detested herself. She really did, and even though it would kill her on the inside, she could accept it if Naruto started to hate her. But she had to strengthen herself. She was also worried that she wouldn't be able to train as well close to him because of the distracting emotions she couldn't control when around him. She had urged her father to train her more because of this, and she even persisted in doing so after hours. This was the cause of her occasional silent tears, which were typically shed on the same day that she had witnessed her crush suppress his own. Even if he betrayed her, she would stop at nothing to keep him safe. 1.5 more years go by. As 10 clones materialized all around him, Naruto raised his hands into his well-known modified tiger seal and avoided a skillful left hook. As soon as they hit the ground, they dispersed, attempting to flank their shared adversary, already having his plan in mind. As 3 were eliminated by strategically placed kunai that were hurled so quickly that Naruto missed the movement, he swore. He turned, catching each of his clones in turn and hurling them at their enemy as 2 of them ran up behind him in line. He kept a close eye on them, diverting his attention with the smoke as they were destroyed. He squatted down to give the man a firm kick to the jaw when hidden taijutsu. 1,000 years of death. Unfathomable pain erupted from Naruto's ass, causing his eyes to widen. The rest of his clones vanished as he crashed into the lake, and he was suddenly thrown into the air. Pointing a trembling finger at his opponent, he crawled out of the icy water after limping to the shore. "That's a dirty trick, Kakashi. Sensei," the ninja shrugged, laughing through his mask at the drenched boy. "It's not a trick, it's a technique." He laughed, "And I told you not to call me sensei. None of these twerps will ever pass my test, despite how much the third wants to push a team onto me." Instead of responding, Naruto decided to remove his jacket and shirt and squeeze the water out of them. Kakashi didn't mention it because he didn't want to give the poor girl away, but he could almost feel the heat spike coming from a spot in the trees near the center of the training ground. Since Naruto approached him one day and begged him to train or spar with him, he had sensed her presence, and his appearance somehow persuaded Kakashi. Naturally, he only learned one lesson from the pitying expression. The way he appeared during their spars, the unwavering resolve that kept the child returning no matter how many times he was knocked down, was what kept him constantly assisting the blonde. It made him think of his late sensei, and he had chosen to mentor the boy in the hopes that he would atone for a few of his transgressions. For now, anyway. A tiny hand tugged at his pants, jerking him out of his reverie. He looked down to see a shirtless Naruto pointing silently at his soaked clothes. Kakashi gave him a disbelieving look. "Are you serious, Naruto?" he asked, a drop of perspiration trickling down his cheek. "You want me to dry your clothing with ninjutsu? That's the biggest waste of chakra I could ever." Huffing at the older man, Naruto retorted, "But you were the one who launched me into the lake to begin with. Besides, I don't have many good pairs of clothing," he muttered, kicking dejectedly at the ground. Kakashi hastily wiped the annoyed expression from his face. Oh, these damned peasants. Why were they unable to recognize Naruto as not being the beast? That his genius sensei sacrificed his life to make sure the seal was as tight as possible? Perhaps his association with the Yondaime made him biased, but still. After giving Naruto a one-eyed smile, Kakashi quickly skimmed through a few hand signals. Earth release. Stone wall, fire release, dragon flame. In amazement, Naruto watched as Kakashi conjured up a tiny stone slab that was about 2 feet across and 2 feet high. Then, he directed a tiny stream of fire at the stone, gradually warming it up. The stone was radiating a cozy aura when he extinguished his ember, beckoning Naruto to approach and promising him a restful sleep. Kakashi gave him another smile and said, "Set your clothes on that, and they should dry in no time. Anyway, I'm due at the Hokage's office 10 minutes ago, so I'll see you later, Naruto." Naruto laughed. He thought it was funny that Kakashi was always late for anything. "Okay, see you later, Kakashi. Nissan?" With a blank expression on his face, Kakashi blinked once before grinning once more. "That sounds nice to me." He leapt away, leaving Naruto to lie beside the rock and let the stone's heat lull him into a languid state of contemplation. Naruto felt he could enjoy calling Kakashi his older brother because he appeared to like the term. As he frowned and recalled why Nissan probably hadn't occurred to him at first, his thoughts became somewhat more somber. It appeared that his so-called brother had virtually deserted him. He treated the blonde in a callous way, even though it was clear that he preferred Naruto's company over everyone else's, perhaps with the exception of Hinata. Sasuke has not shown any signs of retreating from his shell, even though it has been nearly 3 years since his family was massacred. When Sasuke refused to accept Naruto's declaration of brotherhood at the start of their fight, Naruto became extremely irate and yelled this at him during one of their spars at the school. Iruka was furious at Naruto's obvious disregard for safety since he had held nothing back and had almost broken his forearms with a strong knee. Sasuke had quietly taken a leave of absence and would not return to classes for the remainder of the day, while Naruto had retorted to his teacher. Although they hadn't spoken much since, Naruto sensed that Sasuke was either angry with him or with himself. Sasuke didn't like feeling weak, especially after losing his family, so he would wager it was the former. It wasn't saying much, but Hinata was a better case. She excused herself at the most inconvenient times, even though he made her train with him about once a week. She explained that she needed to train with her father more than ever because she had learned some of the more complex Hyuga techniques. Naruto felt that Hinata was lying to him, even though he didn't want to think that she would, especially after he had expressed to her how much he detested liars. He was tormented by it, but he was unable to uncover any proof, so he hoped he was just being overly suspicious. The only comfort was that, in his presence, she appeared to be blushing just as frequently as she had in the past, even a few shades darker than he had recalled. Because of this, he enjoyed prodding, teasing, and poking her more than ever before. He also enjoyed getting a half-hearted slap or shove while she screamed his name at him. He was giddy and only got more excited when he saw her puff her cheeks and stammer out her disapproval of his antics. He wasn't sure why, but he never wanted to provoke her anger, so he would never push her too far. He had witnessed that event once, and it wasn't a pleasant one. Flashback. Enjoying each other's company, Naruto and Hinata strolled down the street. After completing an especially demanding training session, Naruto was craving ramen. While Hinata giggled shyly at his antics, he clapped his hands together and rubbed them together while thinking about how much of his favorite food he was about to eat. Hinata initially intended to avoid interacting with Naruto in order to concentrate entirely on her training, but she quickly resumed her heavy stalking of him. She felt bad about spending time with him in a self-centered manner because she could have used that time to fortify herself and support him, but she was only human. When Hinata saw his pant leg dragging slightly and barely hanging on by a few threads, she snapped out of her reverie. As she prodded his shoulder, her brows furrowed. Naruto-kun, your pants, she uttered, pointing to the unruly article of apparel. He moaned as he looked down. He sighed and grinned at the brunette by his side, saying, "Aw man, I really like this pair." For a moment, he found himself thinking, "But it's fine, I still have," while his face fell sadly, a pair left. When he cared to tell her the date, Hinata took his hand right away and hurried off to a store that she knew carried the orange pants Naruto wore. She had searched every shop in the village for potential birthday presents for him. Naruto flinched as they got closer to the door of the store Hinata had selected, attempting to resist her grip. Hey, Hinata-chan. Let's just go eat. I can get pants later, I swear I will. As Hinata felt her cheeks heat up, she stopped tugging and shifted her head in Naruto's direction. Trying to hide her embarrassment, she whispered, "Don't worry, Naruto-kun. They wouldn't dare mess with you while I'm with Y.U." Naruto looked at her in wonder that she understood why he was hesitating, and then he nodded and smiled at her with a particularly kind grin. Hinata felt dizzy and quickly turned around as her stomach began to turn over. She was confident that she would keep Naruto out of trouble, but they managed to sneak in covertly in an attempt to avoid detection. They went around to the back of the store and found the little area that said, "Sale." They saw the bright orange pants at the bottom of the rack right away. The villagers tended to avoid that color because Naruto was known for wearing it exclusively and no one wanted to be associated with him. It wasn't that no one else liked that color in particular. As Naruto was showing Hinata the several pairs he had discovered in his size, the store owner caught a glimpse of Hinata out of the corner of his eye and rushed up to greet them. He trailed off, catching a glimpse of Naruto, who went bone-dry upon seeing the man. "Hyuga-sama. I'm incredibly honored to have you in my humble store. What can I help you with today?" he said. A hateful expression appeared on the man's face as he gritted his teeth. He spit out, "What the fuck are you doing in here, demon?" and reached for the boy's shirt. "You'd better clear the fuck out of my store, BEF." Hinata clamped a vice-like grip around his wrist as he gasped in agony. He turned to face her, startled, and almost drenched from the intensity of the glare she was giving him. With a dangerous head tilt, she asked, "What are you doing?" The man, naive as he was, had waved his hand in front of his face, oblivious to his imminent doom, assuming she didn't like that he was acting so violently in front of her. "Oh my, I'm quite sorry, Hyuga-sama. If you would please step towards the front counter, I'll make sure that this pathetic excuse for a boy doesn't bother you again, so if you would place." He lost the rest of his words as he threw up blood and frantically reached for his stomach, where Hinata had placed her palm. He dropped to his knees, staring at her with wild, scared eyes, and she watched icily. Hyuga-sama. If I ever hear of you treating Naruto-kun like this again," she uttered softly as she tugged his head to the side and gripped his hair. His bladder finally lost control as he whimpered at the sight of the steel glinting in her hands. His insides felt like molten lead, and he nodded angrily while groaning in agony. Her expression abruptly changed to one of shyness as she went up to the blonde who had sought cover in the clothes rack behind them. While stuttering out assurances that the man wouldn't harm him and that he insisted on receiving the clothes for free as payment for his actions, she gently tugged his sleeve. Since he had been spending most of his allowance on ramen, this had made Naruto feel much better, and he had gone out with Hinata. However, he had witnessed the entire exchange and had made a silent vow to never, ever anger Hinata, even if he had been hiding in the coat rack. Final flashback. Naruto quickly shook his head to get the ideas out of his head. They were his friends, and they would all get back together eventually. All that mattered was that He threw on his discarded clothes and got to his feet. Heat was injected into every pore of his body by the warm fabric that clung to him. Naruto gave a foolish smile, enjoying the sensation, and then headed for the Aburame complex. Naruto had intended to visit his friend Shino, with whom he had been spending more and more time after seeing Kakashi. Shino was perceived by many as being emotionless and stoic, but Naruto had identified the issue. All they could see was Shino. Shino was more than just a person, though. Naruto could sense Shino's different emotions based on the frequency and pitch of the buzzing that typically hummed from him. Another significant clue that frequently determined the difference between two buzzing pitches that were similar was his eyebrows. He could tell that Shino was pleased that someone took the time to understand the telltale signs of his moods, even though it had taken some time to get down right. Naruto began on a grassy hill and walked languidly across the training area. In contrast to the dim and winding alleys that afflicted Konoha's less affluent neighborhoods, this shortcut was flooded with warmth and sunlight. Naruto smirked as he looked up and saw the clouds moving across the sky with a lazy gait similar to his own. This day would be ideal for. Man, I sure do envy clouds. Jogging the final few steps up the hill to see Shikamaru and Choji lying side by side in the grass, Naruto laughed. A bag of chips was opened by Choji's side, and occasionally his hand would slowly walk across the grass to put one in his mouth. As Shikamaru watched the white puffs in the sky travel through the boundless sea of blue, he twisted a blade of grass in his mouth from side to side. Naruto sat behind them and said, "Hey Shikamaru, hey Choji. What are you guys up to?" While Shikamaru closed his eyes and muttered something about avoiding his mother, Choji turned to face Naruto, grinning and offering him a chip. Naruto put the tiny morsel in his mouth while grinning and laughing. It was during one of his more elaborate pranks that he had first met the two boys, hiding in a game room during one of their brief breaks at the academy. Where they believed the boy had disappeared, teachers had thundered down the hall, slipping and sliding because it was almost impossible to balance on the slick floor. Before noticing the two boys in the room, opposite each other at a small wooden board, he had laughed silently at them. Naruto had approached them, cautiously introducing himself and being greeted with a warm greeting. "Shogi," Shikamaru had uttered, his eyes darting across the board with an unusual level of awareness. "Are you familiar with chess? It's similar, but there are more pieces and different rules." Following his observation of them playing, Naruto gradually began spending more time with them. Naruto discovered that he really liked both of them because they were both very kind. Though neither of his friends appeared to be interested in Naruto's new acquaintances, Naruto had wanted to introduce them to Sasuke and Hinata. Sasuke had dismissed him with an irritated expression, and Hinata had politely declined, stating that she needed to train. Naruto, however, sat down in the grass beside the other two boys and took a deep breath, enjoying their company. Shikamaru heard a poof, and turned to see another Naruto carrying on in the same manner as the first. He raised an eyebrow and turned to face Naruto, but the boy simply shook his head and closed his eyes under the glaring sun. The young Nara shrugged, deciding that contemplating the matter was too much trouble, and returned to observing the clouds as they rolled across the sky. Shino had appeared in front of them all at some point, and Naruto could sense that he was a little anxious. Naruto's clone informed me that there was some sort of gathering to view the clouds. Is it acceptable for me to join you? Having never spoken to the Aburame before, Choji appeared a little uneasy, but Shikamaru didn't appear to be at all anxious. He looked boredly at the stoic boy and sighed. "Sure, can't exactly stop you from looking at the sky, can I?" After giving a nod, Shino took a seat beside Naruto. He appeared somewhat tense, but a few minutes later he was lying on the grass with his hive enjoying the sun's warmth. Naruto looked over and saw his three friends lounging in the sweltering heat. "Uruka. Sensei, I did it," he thought, straightening his head and grinning. "I've made a lot of new friends." A year afterward, Choji's fist struck Naruto's jaw, knocking him back, and he grunted. He was caught by a few clones that had been called before, and he corrected himself. His grin said, "That was a good punch, but I'm not nearly close to being finished." Choji gave him a broad smile before sealing his hand in one. His arms and legs withdrew into his body as he suddenly grew large. As Choji rolled through them, crushing them beneath his enormous form, each of Naruto's clones threw their partners aside, giving their lives to save the original and as many others as possible. The remaining clones of Naruto swiftly threw kunai with ninja wire fastened to them in the direction of the trees across from Choji, enabling several wires to secure the spherical boy to the tree. "Now, Shino!" yelled Naruto. Choji was surrounded by dozens of insects that seemed to appear out of nowhere as they sucked the chakra from him. He yelled, "Okay, I give up," as he shrank back to his typical size. Choji scowled as the wire slackened significantly. "Man, wish I'd thought of that sooner. I didn't realize it would free me." Suddenly, with his hands in his pockets, Shino emerged from the trees. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Something wasn't right. His hands were never in his pants, but rather in the pockets of his jacket. Upon closer inspection, he noticed that Shino's shadow seemed to be longer. Naruto could tell Shino was frustrated when he said, "I give up as well." As Shikamaru walked out of the trees behind him, Naruto realized why. There was only one possible explanation for the perfect match between his actions and Shino's. After Shikamaru relaxed his technique, Shino stretched his muscles and said, "I must admit, I never planned for you using my own companion's shadows against me." Shikamaru appeared bored as he used one hand to scratch his head. He muttered, "Yeah, well, it was a real pain working with so many tiny shadows," before turning to face Naruto with an uncharacteristically strong resolve. "Alright Blondie, it's just you and me now." As more clones materialized at his side, Naruto lowered himself and grinned. "There's no way we're gonna lose, right guys?" As they charged forward, his clones roared their approval, each eye blazing. Without hesitation, Shikamaru jumped backward, engulfed by the tree shadows. Naruto stopped short of the tree line as the clones faltered. One of the Narutos tried to squint through the darkness created by the foliage and muttered, "Do you really think it's a good idea to go in there after him, boss? He's probably got some whole big thing set up in there to take us out." Naruto smiled and nodded. "Yeah, but if he's not gonna come out, we'll just have to go in, won't we?" The clone complained that he didn't have to vanish in smoke, but he and the other clones continued pushing into the trees. They were still unprepared when one of them tripped a wire that had been carefully placed in the shadows of some leaves, even though they were jumping slowly from branch to branch. The four clones caught in the hail of metal were not as fortunate as Naruto, who was flung to safety as shuriken blasted out from either side of the area. That specific incident appeared to be the catalyst, as clones began to appear out of nowhere, as if at random. With his teeth clenched, Naruto leapt straight up and landed on one of the tallest branches he could find. Without looking, he called forth a few more clones and peered into the trees. As he prepared multiple shuriken in his hands, he muttered, "We were able to take out Choji so easily because he was probably setting up all these traps while giving Shino a little breathing room. I'm thinking he's somewhere in front of us, making sure we can't leave the zone of his traps. What do you guys think?" As they grasped their own weapons, his clones nodded and appeared resolute. But one of them, looking bored, poked his pinky in his ear. The clone flicked the piece of earwax away and asked, "Do you really think throwing a bunch of shuriken around is gonna lure him out?" Naruto frowned. Even though his clones had inherited his attitude, he detested it when they developed it. Maybe not, but it's better than doing nothing. When he felt the cold steel against his neck, he turned around again and prepared to jump into the forest. He chuckled a little and whistled softly as he heard several clones pop at once. Shikamaru withdrew his kunai and proceeded to put it in his pouch. "Looks like I win." Naruto scratched his head and nodded. "That was super smooth. How did you do that? I didn't notice you at all nearby." With a snort, Shikamaru flew through several hand seals. Naruto slapped his forehead while gazing at a doppelganger in a puff of smoke. "You just snuck in with my clones when I wasn't looking, man. I've gotta be careful about that." Shikamaru dismissed the henge with a nod. "You've gotten so used to the technique that you hardly concentrate on the number of clones you summon, or even care to look at them. All I had to do was push you into a corner and force you to watch your surroundings, meaning that you would automatically summon clones at your back. When that happened I just snuck in, and you didn't bother to check." At this point, Choji and Shino were watching them as they walked back into the clearing, interested in how the rest of their match would turn out. "He won," Naruto cried, sulking, and jogged the remaining distance to them. "He impersonated one of my clones to get behind my guard." Shino gave a contemplative nod. "That sounds most ingenious. Congratulations on beating Naruto-san, Shikamaru-san." Shikamaru landed on the grass and scratched his head. It was more trouble than it was worth. With an exaggerated sigh of relief, Naruto threw off his coat and reclined on the grass. Oh man, I'm so ready to be done with the academy. What about you guys? As eager as any to finish the classes that never stopped dragging, the other boys nodded their agreement. With a few chips in his mouth, Choji inquired, by the way, where's Kiba? The Inuzuka had only been a part of their small group for a few months, but like Naruto, he never missed an opportunity to display his strength, even though it was weak compared to the other misfits in their group. Naruto stretched on the grass and remarked, I believe he mentioned something about looking after the dogs. With a cheeky smile, he forced himself to stand up as his stomach growled. Hey, let's go get some ramen. Shikamaru winced. Because he was spending more time with Naruto, he had consumed more ramen than he would have preferred during the previous month. He was beginning to feel the effects of his diet, but he didn't detest the time at all. Unfortunately, the boys ignored his objections and moved on toward the ramen stand. Suddenly, Naruto's hands jerked to his torso, and he embarrassedly scratched his head. Hey, I forgot my jacket back there, I'll catch up to you guys. After the other three expressed their agreement, Naruto hurried back to the clearing, eager to start eating. But when he saw where they were standing in the grass, his favorite orange jacket was gone. He searched the clearing from top to bottom, even in some of the lower tree branches, but it had mysteriously disappeared. With a sigh, Naruto turned around and walked glumly in the direction of his friends, lamenting the loss of one of his jackets. He could ask Hinata to go clothes shopping with him again, but he wasn't sure if she would agree, so that was the only bright spot in the situation. She had been acting strangely lately, even for her, but he had long since come to terms with the fact that she might never spend as much time with him as she had when they first met. Shaking his head, Naruto sprinted faster in the direction of the ramen stand. It was his favorite food, which was a godsend if anything could lift his spirits. A gamble that paid off. Hinata watched in silence as Naruto leapt from the clearing before releasing the breath she was holding. She gazed adoringly at the orange item of clothing she was holding in her hands and rubbed it against her cheek, catching a faint scent that reminded her so much of him. However, their time at the academy was coming to an end, which meant that they would be placed on genin teams. She would make sure they were on the same team, which would secure them ages of time together, certainly enough to make up for all the time lost thus far. She brought the jacket's heart to her nose, inhaling deeply as her mind was filled with Naruto's scent, and she swayed drunkenly on the spot, pink dusting her cheeks. She laid back, bringing the jacket to her face again, breathing in the scent of ramen, sweat, and nature. It was her favorite combination of all time. A year afterward, even though he had grown stronger for his age, Naruto still feared losing the friends he had worked so hard to gain. He forced his negative thoughts aside, knowing that he would not fail. Naruto stood facing the academy's doors on this final day, the day of his test, after which he would either become a shinobi or be forced to leave all of his friends behind. Naruto sat in his chair, trembling with anticipation. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for since he made the decision to take care of himself. He would be an official ninja of Konoha in a matter of hours. His legs shook and rattled the desk, causing the group below to look at him with annoyance. To his surprise, no one gave him a second look, as if he were ignoring him. Though she doubted that she could maintain her stoic facade in the face of alone time with Naruto-kun, Hinata had adopted a sort of inner Hinata to express her actual feelings about Naruto and the situation. In the presence of other people, however, she felt that if she could keep herself calm and relatively unfeeling, she could make more logical decisions and thus better protect Naruto. In this moment, inner Hinata had lavender palms and was cheering on the blonde with all of her might. The brunette knew how important this moment was to Naruto, and she subtly brushed her arm against his, offering him her support and admiration. Unfortunately, Naruto was too dense to understand the gesture, but the thought was there. The test was a joke, and the only thing worth mentioning was the Jonin sensei they would be assigned. Sasuke thought about the potential veteran he could train under, and he relished the thought of being able to obtain greater power than before. He thought back to the time he trained with only 2 friends at his side, and he wondered, as he has done many times in recent months, if he made the right decision to train on his own. Sasuke looked impassively out the window, a little irritated with the blonde next to him. Naruto almost jumped out of his seat when Iruka walked into the classroom, waking him from his reverie. Uchiha, who had raven hair, sighed and gave the blonde a displeased look. He was still impulsive and disgustingly happy all the time, and he had once enjoyed it. It had even been contagious. But now, actively pursuing friendship and mirth will only set me back in my goal, Sasuke said to himself for what seemed like the millionth time. The truth was, Sasuke missed being around his friends. He missed training with Naruto, missed laughing at Hinata when she puffed her cheeks at a joke Naruto would make at her expense. He missed being with them. But he couldn't ignore his clan's revenge. It had to take priority over everything else. He had to make sure they didn't die in vain. No matter how miserable it made him, or who it pushed away. Naruto and Hinata had each other, so his absence for however long it took was just something they'd have to deal with together. Iruka said, beaming, "Now class, before we get started with the exams, I just want to tell you how proud I am that you've all made it this far." In contrast to the usual routine, the faces in the class were alert and attentive, with a good number of them actually appearing excited. Like Naruto, they were eager to start their shinobi careers and prove themselves to the world. It's taken a lot of hard work and dedication to get to where you are, and I don't want any of you to undervalue yourself on that, explained Iruka. You are deserving of passing this test and starting your lives. I'm dying over here, Iruka. Sensei, can we just get it on already? When he finally lost it, Naruto screamed, got to his feet, and slammed his palms against the desk. Iruka, seeing this, took a deep breath to calm his ire, smiling shyly at the class, while a few students gave the hyperactive blonde irritated looks, but a good number nodded their heads, tired of the endless speeches their teacher liked to give for some reason. Well, Naruto, you might be correct. It's either a pass or a fail today. The time for words is over. This is how the test will proceed. There was a written test, Naruto moaned loudly at this. A test of the academy's basic jutsu, and a basic taijutsu and weapons exercise in the training area. You will receive a grade following the last test section, indicating whether you passed or failed. A Jonin sensei will be assigned to those who pass, and you will meet them tomorrow morning to start your training. Does everyone get it? Iruka led the class out to the training yard, where he divided them into two groups, and the students nodded, as if they were eager to begin the tests. Mizuki. Sensei will be assisting me with the exams today, so please show him the same deference that you would show me. After everyone nodded in agreement, Naruto soon found himself facing the man with the silver hair. Now Naruto.kun, smirking, Mizuki said, I want you to give it your all, okay? With a nod, Naruto assumed his well-known position. Mizuki. Sensei, I won't disappoint you. Hinata was silently watching the exchange, but her inner voice was supporting Naruto as strongly as she could. But her thoughts were cut off when she saw Mizuki make a strange hand gesture as he and Naruto bowed to each other to begin the spar. Naruto jumped right in, but his punch was wide, and Mizuki easily countered with a spinning back kick to his side. Being careless, Naruto.kun. The muttered genjutsu cast by their instructor caused Naruto's chakra system to be on the fritz, causing his depth perception and sense of balance to become erratic. Whereas previously she had witnessed him fight with precision and power, all of his attacks were now sloppy and uncoordinated, giving Mizuki easy openings that he fully exploited. You'll have to do better than that if you want to pass, Mizuki said with barely restrained glee. Hinata's eyes narrowed as she silently activated her Byakugan, turning her fears into a reality. As he ruined her Naruto-kun's test, Hinata gritted her teeth and watched in frustration as Naruto was kicked out of the ring, Mizuki dispelling the genjutsu as he threw the blonde to avoid raising suspicion outside the fighting area. She wanted to release the genjutsu on him, but what if he was disqualified because of outside interference? After all, she was only an academy student, and they would likely listen to Mizuki's testimony more than hers by a wide margin. Well, Naruto.kun, you didn't fail by a significant amount because I can tell you've been working hard. You can certainly make up for it in the other tests, Mizuki said with a tone of fake regret. As she watched Naruto nod sorrowfully, his earlier excitement vanished into thin air. Hinata fixed her gaze on his dejected expression and made the snap decision that Mizuki would pay somehow. Next up, Hinata Hyuga. Did the gods want revenge, too? It appeared so. She entered the ring in her own Juken stance, smiling sadistically inside. Mizuki arched an eyebrow. I trained Neji for a good while, so I know what it's supposed to look like, he said, adding, that doesn't seem like the tradition, gentle fist. Hinata didn't blink at all. Through rigorous training, my father and myself have come to the conclusion that the tradition Juken does not fit my body type or natural fighting style, so we have tweaked it to make it more effective for me. Do not despair, for it is just as effective, if not more than our base style. Mizuki assumed his stance after nodding. Understood. Begin. He had instinctively jumped to the side as soon as he finished speaking, avoiding 2 chakra pulses from her hands that glistened in the air. He thought, F. Fast, and shivered when he saw her eyes. With their Byakugan activated, all Hyugas appeared more menacing, but when you combine this with Hinata's intense hatred, the image was truly horrifying. In an attempt to penetrate Mizuki's defenses, Hinata launched an elaborate dance of palm strikes and finger pokes infused with chakra, putting Mizuki on the defensive. But he wasn't a Chunin for nothing, and he was avoiding everything pretty well. When he heard his voice, icy and filled with hatred, he was in midair, having just flipped backwards from a possible kidney shot. 8 trigrams. Air palm. He lost his balance due to the burst of compressed chakra, and he was unable to avoid the subsequent series of finger prods that sealed off Tenketsu in his legs. Hinata stood in front of him, glaring at him as he collapsed to his knees, panting. She gave him a calculating look that suggested she was thinking about something. She abruptly pivoted on her heel and left, attracting Iruka's attention to tend to their now disabled sensei. Mizuki thought, damn, she's going to be scary one day. As all of this was going on, Naruto had picked up Hinata and was swinging her in circles while applauding the girl he had embraced tightly. As the object of Hinata's affections held her tightly against his body, disregarding their close physical proximity, her face turned a solid brick red. As he showered her with compliments and boasted about how his best friend Hinata-chan was the best, she felt like she was in heaven. She fainted for the first time in a long time. Sasuke had just finished his match with Iruka when he wandered over, just as Naruto was about to lose it. He sat aloofly by the side of the prone girl and said, "She's fine, moron. Go get ready for the weapons training, I want to talk to her." When Naruto saw how much more openly Sasuke appeared to speak around Hinata without saying anything, his expression fell. With a slump to his shoulders, he left, making Sasuke feel bad once more. After a few minutes, Hinata's eyes opened and she took on a dejected expression upon realizing that Naruto was no longer smothering her. Sasuke looked at the passing clouds and said, "Hinata. How did you get so strong? I've heard that the air palm is an A-class technique that is given to Hyuga Chunin who are aspiring to be Jonin as a sort of rite of passage. How do you know it?" Brushing some dirt off her jacket, Hinata sat up. "All my training with my father is paying off. While my air palm isn't powerful by any means, it's enough to disrupt. He taught it to me as a reward for learning another technique of ours nearly as fast as he did." With his gaze still fixed on the clouds, Sasuke nodded. "I wonder, if my father were still alive, if I could be that strong." Hinata gazed at her longtime friend, her eyes softening. Hinata could see how much he cared for Naruto and her, even though he had cut himself off from the outside world. With a hint of mystery, she said, "You know, my father's training isn't the only thing helping me get strong." Curiosity burning in his eyes, Sasuke's gaze ripped from the sky to her. "What else?" he asked, eager to learn more. Her eyes softened, her lips parted in a tender smile, her body exuded peace, and he saw her whole face change. She said, "Naruto-kun." Sasuke was struck like a boulder by the weight of her words alone. With a fire in her eyes that Sasuke had never seen before, she went on, "I would do anything for him, anything to protect him." What had changed her in this way over the last few years? Holding her hand gently over her heart, she concluded, "That's why I'm able to get back up when I want to stay down. That's why I force myself to keep fighting even when my body wants to fail. He makes me strong." The tears that had unconsciously welled up in Sasuke's eyes were blinked away. Uncertain as to why Hinata would go that far, he questioned, "Why?" But he knew the answer already. Hinata said, her eyes darkening, "You know why, you've known ever since that night." With a nod, Sasuke returned his attention to the sky. Since Hinata had shared that night and all of that death and suffering with him, she was the only person he could ever talk to about these things. Despite her apparent lack of concern for his family, she was nonetheless able to empathize with him and recognize the atrocities that were part of the Uchiha complex. Sasuke finally acknowledged the reason for his withdrawal when he said, "I don't want to let anyone in anymore. Hinata appeared unsurprised. To the boy's surprise, she added, I didn't either, at first. I even tried to push my feelings for Naruto-kun aside, so that I could focus on getting stronger to protect him. She looked over to Sasuke. But you want to get stronger to kill your brother, so I can see how it could consume you. Sasuke's eyebrow went up. I don't follow your line of thought. Hinata turned to look up at the sky. I tried to push Naruto-kun away, but seeing the very person I want to protect saddened because he sees me, because I wasn't spending any time with him, it hurt. More than anything. Her expression became gloomy. I cried a lot at night, those first few years. All I wanted was to keep him safe, so I never had to see him die again. But seeing him miserable just at the sight of me, was almost as bad. So I started to spend time with him again, just enough to keep him happy, but... She grinned. I quickly remembered how it was to be with him, at his side. All the reasons I wanted to protect him became fresh in my mind, and I realized that only by reminding myself every once in a while why I want to protect him, and be at his side, will I truly grow strong enough to shield him. As he absorbed the information, Sasuke reclined in the grass. He opened his mouth to say something, but Hinata's quiet voice interrupted him. That's why you can't progress, Sasuke. You have no one to protect, only one to harm. If you search for power that way, you might get it, but you won't be yourself. You'll lose sight of who and what's important. With a grunt, Sasuke knitted his eyebrows. If he made the decision to defend what was important to him, would he actually become stronger? These days, what was he even near? He scowled as images of Naruto and Hinata passed through his head. Hinata was strong enough to not require protection. Naruto. He remembered the frenzied blonde. He trained hard, offered his friendship, and offered to help out with small tasks so that he could spend more time with his friends. Additionally, he was an orphan who had never experienced the solace of grandparents, parents, uncles, or aunts. Indeed, he was positive that before Hinata, he had no friends. Despite everything, he was still able to prioritize others over himself. As he watched Naruto toss his shuriken, missing his targets, Sasuke thought sadly, someone idealistic like that deserves to be protected. After scoffing, he went to conduct his own weapons examination. I apologize for not being able to assist with that. It's too late for me, Naruto. I'm in too deep. I apologize. Hinata can keep watch over you. On the grounds of the academy, Naruto sat behind his familiar tree, his head between his knees. Here, he would have to put up with innumerable glares and mutters while he watched other students being picked up by their parents. When things went terribly wrong, like today, he also ran to this location. He had not succeeded. In what way had he failed? Despite his intense training, he seemed to have a lot of problems. He was first unable to strike Mizuki Sensei. It bothered him that he simply couldn't tell where he was. Why had things gotten so bad when he was better than that? Although each tool he threw seemed to veer off the path of the posts he was supposed to be hitting, he believed he could redeem himself in the weapons department. He didn't understand why he couldn't use basic shuriken and kunai to strike those posts when he was blind. He could use all kinds of weapons to do so. He was unable to respond to many of the questions on the written exam. Hinata urged him to alert him when significant lessons were being covered, but he was unable to recall anything. Knowing that he was done, he had submitted his test with a heavy heart. Knowing there was nothing that could save him, he hadn't even shown up for the last part. In front of their entire class, he did not want to experience the humiliation of being refused a headband. He wiped his eyes and sniffed. He would now be abandoned by Hinata and Sasuke. Kiba, Choji, Shikamaru, and Shino would all graduate. And he would be by himself once more. Years began to sting his eyes once more, so he slammed his fist into the tree behind him and let the tears fall to the ground. Why? Why did this have to occur when things were beginning to improve? Naruto-kun, are you alright? Naruto quickly wiped away the signs of his desperation as he jerked his head to the side. Above him, Mizuki stood, watching him anxiously. Yeah, I'm fine, Naruto lied while lowering his eyes to the floor. The older man crouched next to Naruto and said, No, you're not. You've actually managed to make a few friends with this class, have you not? Naruto sniffed and nodded. Mizuki asked, And you don't want them to leave you behind, right? I almost got him. Once more, Naruto nodded. Well, this is only supposed to be for special circumstances, but, Naruto's gaze brightened. What's only for special circumstances? Mizuki gave a surrendering wave of his hands. Okay. Well, there's a special test you can take to pass the academy, but we usually only reserve it for students who had to miss the final exams for one reason or another. I think I may be able to swing it because you missed your final jutsu testing. Naruto jumped up and grabbed Mizuki's arm. Really? I can still pass? Mizuki laughed at the boy's credulity and nodded. You sure can, Naruto-kun. All you have to do is sneak into the Hokage's office tonight, find the scroll that I've hidden inside, and bring it to the forest. I will meet you at approximately midnight. This is similar to missions you'll undertake as a ninja, so no revealing details or anything like that, okay? With a grim expression of determination, Naruto nodded. I won't let you down, Mizuki-sensei. Mizuki smiled a little sadistically as he nodded. I know you won't, Naruto-kun. Naruto laughed uncontrollably as he jumped from tree to tree. It was so simple to defeat the old man. It was really too simple. All he had to do was change into a group of nude girls to be defeated right away. Naruto took a seat on the ground and looked up at the sky to determine where the moon was. With a glance at the scroll beside him, he muttered, looks like I've still got some time. On the side, the kanji for Scroll of Seals was displayed. Might as well see what's inside. Naruto's initial observation was the shadow cloning method. Boring, I already know that, Naruto muttered, but he kept reading the sections about his favorite jutsu. The blonde said, I can make them explode, cool, before losing herself in the scroll. He didn't notice the high-pitched whirring behind him because he was so engrossed in it. As he spun his Fuma shuriken, Mizuki thought, stupid demon brat. I'll get this over with so I can begin my journey to grass. A pair of pale eyes widened in terror as Mizuki swung the enormous shuriken at Naruto's back with a powerful heave. Hinata yelled, Naruto-kun, and jumped out of the trees, barely deflecting the weapon with two pairs of kunai. She was about to exhale in relief when she noticed another one coming directly at the blonde, who appeared stunned by the sight of her and the lethal weapon spinning in his direction. Unthinking, Hinata threw herself at Naruto, tackling him to the ground as the weapon sliced into her back, using all the chakra she could muster. She looked into Naruto's astonished blue eyes and screamed in agony, blood dripping from her mouth. Seeing the weapon embedded in her body, he spoke slowly, Hinata-chan, Hinata-chan, why did you do that? Trying to ignore the burning pain coursing through her body, Hinata panted. Because, she uttered, her eyes fluttering. She ground out, you're precious to me, Naruto-kun, before her strength failed and she fell on top of him. Hinata-chan, oi, Hinata-chan, exclaimed Naruto, who scuttled out from under her and drew the weapon from behind her. Before gently placing her head on the forest floor, he tore off his jacket and used it to bandage the wound. He could see that she had lost a significant amount of blood, but she was still breathing. Mizuki leapt from his position and began to walk toward the two. He spat and gave Hinata a disgusted look. So, I see the demon has found a harlot to accompany him, eh? What a pathetic waste of female flesh. With an angry expression on his face, Naruto's eyes suddenly swiveled to him. With an increasingly irate expression, he asked slowly, Mizuki-sensei, you hurt Hinata-chan. His eyes flashed red as he yelled, I thought you were helping me. What about the test? Why did you hurt Hinata-chan? Mizuki grimaced. He'd hoped this would be simple, but with the team the Hokage would unavoidably send to retrieve the scroll, that girl's meddling might have just made things much more difficult. In order to kill the child as soon as possible, he had to provoke him to attack by thinking. Mizuki sneered, fucking idiot, did you not notice the test was rigged the entire time? Naruto stepped back after getting to his feet. You can't even realize when genjutsu is acting on you, or on something as trivial as a piece of paper, can you? With a horrified expression, Naruto blinked. Our spar and my test, but what about the weapons? Mizuki boasted, I gave you that special set for test use, remember? While giggling at Naruto's dejected expression. They, as well as those posts you were using, had repulsion seals on them. It was almost impossible for you to be able to make any of them contact their targets. Man, for a demon, you sure are dumb. What, did assuming this form reduce your mental capacity or something? Naruto looked up in bewilderment, still reeling from the realization that Mizuki had ruined his entire test. Demon. What? Mizuki advanced further, causing Naruto to crouch near Hinata's prone position. You don't know? Huh, that's a laugh. Do you remember how the Yondaime was killed? Naruto gave a shaky nod. Yeah, he died killing the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Mizuki growled. Wrong. He died sealing the Kyuubi into a baby. Can you guess who that baby was? Every glare, harsh word, and beating returned to Naruto in startling clarity, causing his eyes to widen. Fucking demon. A poisonous child, you bastard, you killed my brother. Have you taken enough? Get out of here? Take out the demon? Get away from Yondaime. He lowered himself to his knees and mumbled, no, he was the Kyuubi. Everyone detested him because of this. The village treated him like dirt because of this. The blonde's defeated expression made Mizuki snicker. Dark thoughts came to him as his gaze shifted to the prone Hyuga behind him. He licked his lips, thinking, she's obviously growing behind that coat. She is aware that I attacked Naruto, so she will have to die anyhow. It might as well be enjoyable. Mizuki walked beside Naruto, who was still slumped and gazing blankly. Mizuki reached out and took off the girl's coat. A hand sprang out and grabbed his wrist, causing him to grit his teeth in agony. Still kneeling in the dirt, he traced the offending appendage back to the blonde. He turned his red eyes to Mizuki and said slowly, what do you think you're doing? To Hinata-chan. Mizuki growled and tried to ram a kunai into Naruto's skull by flipping it into a reverse grip. Naruto's attack faltered as he applied an unnaturally strong squeeze to the man's wrist. Taking advantage of the moment, the blonde slammed a hard fist into Mizuki's stomach, sending him sprawling to the ground away from the young couple. Mizuki frowned when he noticed Naruto standing guard in front of the young girl, his eyes and face ferocious. So you've finally decided to show your true self, eh, demon? Mizuki exploded. No words came out of Naruto's mouth as his red eyes glared back at him. Mizuki combined a fireball with some kunai and hurled them at the boy. Before jumping off, with the weapons and jutsu crashing innocuously into the tree they had been beneath, Naruto snatched Hinata and slung her over his shoulder. The Chunin kept a close eye on the two before smoke bombs abruptly blocked his view. As he leapt to his feet, he noticed multiple pairs of Naruto and Hinata strewn from the smoke. Mizuki threw himself after a pair, grimacing. He needed to get this done fast. With Hinata's head in his lap and his hand resting on her wet forehead, Naruto sat motionless. He couldn't risk hurting her, but he needed her help. But he wanted to harm Mizuki more than anything else. Not good. Instead of fighting, he had to use all of his willpower to get Hinata out of danger, but he had succeeded in some way. He could now conceal her. In order to conceal her from plain view, he called forth some shadow clones and had them henge into foliage. The low-lying tree bowed its branches in comprehension as Naruto snarled, if anyone tries to get her that we don't know, kill them. When Naruto felt the final clones explode, he shot off toward Mizuki. He clenched his fist and created some shadow clones that climbed to the top of the trees. He mumbled, I'll make you pay. Mizuki swore at his bad luck. He had assumed that the boy had simply called forth ordinary Bunshin, but it turned out that they were actually Cage Bunshin. As a result, rather than merely determining whether the clones were an illusion or not, he had to engage in combat with them. Fortunately, they were unarmed because the boy was not yet a registered ninja. However, the silver-haired Chunin suffered a split eyebrow and a cracked rib as a result of the boy's clone's ability to dodge his kunai swipes. He leapt to the side, avoiding an orange missile that had sped from the foliage above, and launched himself in the direction the last pair had gone. After missing, Naruto used chakra to catch himself on the tree trunk before trying to kick Mizuki in the head. He dispelled the now familiar clone by catching the blonde's leg and then slamming his kunai into his stomach. He had to defend against several clones at once after several more fell from the sky. Mizuki began to pant from the strain of juggling 4 Narutos at once and a broken rib, and he knew that the sheer volume of them would overwhelm him soon. Dropping from his limb, he drew a kunai with an explosive tag. As he fell, he slammed it into one of the branches, and he activated the tag as the Naruto clones charged at him. All of the clones were destroyed in the ensuing explosion, along with a few more that were attempting to approach Mizuki's blind spot. A body groaned as it hit the ground after falling from the trees. With a sly smile, Mizuki approached the boy wearing orange and grabbed him by the shirt. Holding the kunai to the blonde's throat, he uttered, "And now you'll die, you pathetic excuse of a demon. Any last words?" He was surprised when the blonde gave him a cheeky smile and raised one finger. He said, "Boom." Mizuki's progress was stopped when the clone's body erupted into a mass expulsion of energy, sending his body through a weaker tree and then colliding with a much larger one. His arm lay useless at a strange angle as his body fell roughly to the ground. Naruto slowly walked up to the broken man, the Fuma shuriken that had impaled Hinata in his hand. He began spinning the weapon in his hand and uttered the words, "We're going to kill Hinata." "Chan." Mizuki sneered at the red-eyed boy, but she was afraid. "What do you care, demon? I don't know how you've seduced her with your tricks, but she doesn't truly care about you. No one does, you hear me? How can anyone love a demon?" he yelled. Despite flinching, Naruto continued to advance steadily. He growled and narrowed his red eyes as he said, "That doesn't excuse you for hurting her, I'll kill you. Then you can never hurt her again." When Mizuki felt hands pinning him to the ground, his eyes widened and he started to stand up. He was surrounded by multiple Narutos, all of whom had ferocious smiles on their faces. "Fucking demon, this is it, this is how I die," Mizuki thought, scowling at the blonde. He was terrified as he saw the Fuma accelerate to terrifying heights and the blade spin through the air with a gentle whir. Raising it into the air, Naruto. "Kun, don't do it." With his hands up in a gesture of submission, Naruto watched Iruka leap into the clearing as he slowly turned his head. "I'm not here to hurt you, Naruto-kun, I just heard from Hokage Sama what happened. But you can't kill him, Naruto-kun, or you'll turn into what he wants you to believe you are." Naruto blinked, finding the man's language odd. He turned to face Iruka and lowered the shuriken into the ground, asking, "What I believe I am?" Naruto said, "Iruka Sensei," with his hair covering his eyes. "Am I a demon? Am I really the Kyuubi?" Iruka winced and scowled at the treacherous Chunin being restrained. That was what he had told him. The blonde's eyes widened to ocean blue as he let out a deep sigh. "No, Naruto-kun. You are not the Kyuubi. I admit, many in the village see you at it, and I did as well. But seeing how tenderly you treat your friends, how you strive to protect those close to you and to protect the village, a demon wouldn't do those things, Naruto-kun." Naruto gasped for air. He wasn't a demon, huh? So he was lying, Naruto uttered, a grin starting to appear. The Kyuubi was killed. The blonde gave Iruka a dejected look as she said, "He wasn't lying about the Kyuubi being sealed inside you, Naruto-kun. However, it's just that. It's sealed in you. If I seal a kunai into a scroll, does the scroll become the kunai? No. You are the demon's container, Naruto. Something very noble and important." With Iruka's words echoing in his ears, Naruto nodded. "Thank you, Iruka Sensei." After giving a nod, Iruka turned to face Mizuki, who remained pinned to the ground. "I see you've subdued Mizuki, Naruto-kun. That's not an easy task." His clones grinned as Naruto scratched the back of his head. "Well, I had a surprise jutsu so." Iruka smiled, walking up to Naruto. "Close your eyes, Naruto." Naruto felt something encircling his head as he followed instructions. "You can open them." Naruto's first observation was that his sensei's headband was missing. "Iruka Sensei, where?" His eyes started to water the moment his hand touched the metal that was resting on his forehead. Iruka joyfully embraced the recently dubbed genin and remarked, "If you can defeat a Chunin, Naruto-kun, you obviously have the skills to be a genin. I see no reason to fail you. Good job, Naruto-kun." Iruka's chest was where Naruto sobbed. He had succeeded. He was a ninja. Naruto reflected, "And soon I'll have the power to protect you even better, Hinata. Chan, Sasuke. Just wait." With a worried expression on his face, Naruto sat by Hyuga Hinata's bed. Naruto would normally have been bouncing around the classroom excited to start learning more complex techniques, but today was supposed to be the day the entire class received their Jonin instructors. But as it was, he didn't want to be anywhere other than by Hinata's side. He asked aloud for the 7th time, "Why?" He was unable to fully understand it. "Why did you let yourself get hurt so badly?" "Yes," He was aware that he would try his hardest to keep his friends safe and that he would take some hits for them if needed. But she almost died. Her spinal column had been just an inch from the blade, meaning that she would have been almost certainly paralyzed or killed. Naruto experienced a fresh wave of self-loathing and disgust upon realizing that the blue net had nearly perished defending him. He froze in his first actual combat scenario, despite all of his training and his assurances that he could protect his friends and his village. He would have perished if Hinata hadn't been present. With a deep sigh, he placed his forehead on the edge of her bed and grimaced. Did this imply that everything he had done so far had been pointless? Did he not have what it took to be a shinobi? Indeed, he was. More than anything else, he was horrified to see Hinata in danger. After all, he could not imagine his beloved people being harmed. But that turned out to be untrue, and his peaceful sleep in front of him was proof of his stupid ideal. Naruto experienced a sense of déjà vu as he recalled that he had been in a similar circumstance just a few years prior. Even though their wounds weren't physical, Hinata and Sasuke had both been hospitalized at that time. Though he had been there with Hinata this time, he had felt just as regretful and useless. He had also let her down. Leaning forward, Naruto took one of her hands in both of his. He had to become even more powerful. Hearing her pant with the effort it had taken to breathe, seeing the blood in her cough, and feeling the sharp metal pierce her tender skin. To him, it was all torture. He didn't want to experience that powerlessness ever again. Or that furious. Which voice was it? Throughout his encounter with Mizuki, it had gradually increased in strength and distance, eventually whispering promises of strength and the capacity to tear his adversaries to pieces. He was about to carry out the power's requirement of putting an end to Mitsuki's pitiful life when Iruka mercifully intervened. The power had felt good. What sort of power would he have gained if he had taken that final step? Did he misjudge not understanding it? If he had it, he would probably have no problem keeping his friends safe. But in some way, it had felt wrong. Was that the demon's voice trapped inside him? The infamous Kyuubi no Kitsune's voice? But it did help him learn how to be a ninja, which returned him to his initial ideas about which team he would be assigned to. Ideally, it would be both Sasuke and Hinata, but if Naruto were honest with himself, he would be fine as long as Hinata was on his side. Despite the fact that Naruto was friendly with many people who could help influence the people who assigned the teams, he doubted that they would all be able to remain on the same team because they were all the top 3 students in the class. When Naruto's eyes opened in response to a gentle yawn, he saw Hinata staring back into his with a look of surprise on her face. After blinking once, she became aware of how close their faces were to one another, and her blush rose rapidly to its highest point. She was able to stammer out, "NNNN Naruto.kun, WH. WH. What are you doing?" As she had when Naruto had first met her. He rubbed his thumb against the back of her hand, which he still held, and laughed a little at her expense. He looked at their combined appendages and said softly, "Making sure you're okay, Hinata-chan. You really worried me, you know?" Even though Hinata was aware that Naruto's response would probably be the same for any of his friends, his heart skipped a beat. "I'm fine, Naruto.kun." Naruto traced various designs into the young girl's skin while nodding. As he kissed her, she shivered at the touch, secretly hoping he would ink the same designs into her hair and back. The full force of her blush returned. She had had especially pleasurable dreams right before waking up, and they seemed to want to infiltrate both her conscious and unconscious minds. Too preoccupied to notice the blue net's internal dilemmas, Naruto uttered, "I know." He shivered and instinctively tightened his hold on her hand. "But it was scary, you know, seeing you bleeding out on me, with that giant weapon in your back," he said. When Hinata saw how upset he was, she tried to comfort him by holding back. He looked up in shock as she said, I can know exactly how you feel, and Naruto.kun. Hopefully, Naruto wouldn't be upset with her for this, so she swallowed the lump in her throat. Nervously, she remarked, "When we were kids, saw some verses. Villagers attack you." Observing Naruto's face tensing in suppressed agony, "I was really worried about you at that time." After shaking his head in an attempt to clear his mind of some of the unpleasant memories, Naruto squinted at her, perplexed. Hinata sighed with relief at not having to explain how she had stalked him for well over a year before finally introducing herself. "What, did I even know you then? Oh well, it doesn't really matter," she said. "Anyways, I have the perfect solution." After blinking, Hinata focused all of her attention on Naruto, not that he didn't already have it. Naruto gave her his trademark foxy grin and punched his open hand. As he scratched the back of his head, he added, "We'll both train our hardest with our new teams so that we get super strong. Hopefully we get the same sensei and are on the same team. Getting to hang out with you every day would make me really happy, you know?" Hinata was dizzy. Naruto wished he could spend every day with her. As inner, Hinata swooned and was ensnared by the fictional Naruto she had created. She thought, "I want to be by your side forever, Naruto." In front of her crush, she shakily said, "W. Would A. Also L. Like that. N Naruto.kun," and bemoaned her lack of confidence. The pressure of being alone with the boy was too much for her to handle, even though it had taken everything she had to maintain her stoic facade around other people. After she had a pleasant conversation with him, the Sandaime couldn't say no, so she knew they would be on the same team. Content to be with Naruto, she shook the thought away, but before she could start questioning him about his day, the Sandaime Hokage entered her room through the open door. His voice was gentle as he said, "Good morning, Naruto.kun. Ah, I see you have woken up Hinata. How are you feeling?" Happy that Naruto had him in his life, Hinata grinned at the man. After saying, "I am feeling well, Hokage Sama, thank you for your concern," she cocked her head in his direction. "Is our arrangement as planned?" After observing with interest as the Hokage's face went white, Naruto gave a sharp nod. "Ah. Yes. About that, young Hyuga. The primary objective that we discussed is achieved, while the secondary was not possible. The next best option was, however, so our deal is." With a radiant smile, Hinata remarked, "Complete. I am very satisfied with that, thank you Hokage Sama." Naruto shifted his confused gaze between his best friend and the Hokage. He had no idea what was happening. Hiruzen caught Naruto's attention with a cough. "In any case, I came to put you two on your Genin team." "Hold on, team? Gigi, does that mean we are on the same team?" Naruto yelled, glancing excitedly from Hinata to the Sandaime. While the elderly Hokage merely chuckled at the blonde's limitless energy, Hinata appeared unsurprised but pleased by Naruto's response. Hiruzen paused, enjoying the impatient expression on Naruto's face. "Thanks for stealing my bravado, Naruto.kun. But yes, you and young Hinata are on the same team, along with," he said, "Aburame Shino." Naruto smiled brightly at him. "Fantastic," he screamed, scratching his head. "I kind of thought we wouldn't be allowed on the same team since we were both really high in rankings, but I kind of hoped it would be Sasuke. Simply put, I'm overjoyed to be with Hinata Chan." As he played fully tousled Hinata's hair, the girl blushed at his attentions to detail but still grinned and leaned into his hand with her eyes half closed. Although pleased for Naruto, Hiruzen couldn't help but think back to how exactly they had ended up on the same team. He thought, she's going to be a good shinobi for sure, but Naruto interrupted him before he could remember the specific incident. "Hi Gigi, may I ask who our Jonin sensei is?" With excitement, Naruto inquired, "Is it Kakashi?" "Nissan? I might be able to train with him this year," he said. "No Naruto, I'm afraid that Kakashi-san will be taking on a different Genin team this year." Naruto's face fell visibly, and the Hokage felt the irate eyes of a certain Hyuga on him. "I'm getting too old for this," Hiruzen sighed, a little sad to break the news to his surrogate grandson. Then he started, to answer the inevitable, "Why, Naruto, do you know what Kakashi-san has?" Pointing to his left eye, Naruto nodded and said, "The Sharingan, correct?" The Sandaime nodded wisely, but Hinata appeared somewhat taken aback by the news. "Yes, exactly. He will be training a combat specialty squad because he was also an Anbu captain." "Yes, you were supposed to be on that same team. Nevertheless, we decided that switching you and Inuzuka Kiba was acceptable after some consideration and your proficiency with Kage Bunshin. As you can see, You were supposed to be assigned to a special tracking squad. However, we have changed the emphasis to include equal amounts of information gathering and tracking. Although Hinata and Shino can identify enemy groups from a distance, you are an invaluable intelligence gatherer because of your capacity to remember information that your shadow clones possess. Naruto nodded at the reasoning, pleased that his special abilities, or rather, his skill, could be regarded as something invaluable. He was undoubtedly headed in the right direction to become Hokage. When Hinata gave him a comforting look, Naruto's smile returned. That being said, the old man went on, Uchiha Sasuke will be on the very team you left. His team consists of himself, Kiba, and Haruno Sakura. Kakashi is required to train that squad since he is the only person who can teach Sasuke how to use the Sharingan, and his combat experience is already nearly unmatched. While Hinata appeared somewhat more submissive to Naruto's acceptance of the circumstances, Naruto nodded in understanding. So, who is our other member? And our sensei of Jonin? Naruto inquired, observing Hiruzen's expressionless expression. The Sandaime said, I already said who your teammate would be, Naruto. Naruto gave him a blank stare. Hinata began softly, N. Naruto.kun. Remember that he said that M.My own and shish. Shino. Sans abilities are useful in T. Tracking. He also said that H. He was our teammate earlier, she said, looking at him somewhat incredulously. As he cupped the bottom of his fist, Naruto's face brightened. Oh yeah? Will Shino be our third, then? That's fantastic. After Hinata and Sasuke, Shino was Naruto's next best friend, so he exclaimed with a broad smile. With a hint of annoyance in his voice, Naruto said, You still haven't told us who our Jonin sensei is, Gigi. The Sandaime laughed a little and gave the blonde a funny look. The old shinobi said, laughing, Well, Naruto.kun, maybe if you could stay on track with our conversation for longer than a minute or two, I would have gotten to it by now. It would also help if I didn't have to repeat myself, he said. His words melted in his mouth as he smiled at Hinata and took her hand as he was about to respond when he heard her giggle softly from the bed. Yes, Gigi, you're correct. I apologize. Who is it now? He shouted, impatiently shaking his and Hinata's joined hands up and down. Hiruzen decided to end their suffering because Hinata was flushed. Well, it's... As the door to Hinata's room opened, a feminine voice said, Yuhi Kurenai, Genjutsu Mistress of Konoha, at your service. Naruto studied the newcomer's appearance, noticing that she was a rather young looking Jonin with black hair and, oddly enough, scarlet eyes. She was dressed in a small shirt and shorts, everything wrapped in bandages. She was a very attractive woman, and clearly quite strong. You're our sensei. Whoa? What cool things are you going to teach us? Inquired Naruto. Kurenai grinned at the child's excitement and stepped aside to allow Shino to enter the room. Naruto gave the boy a warm welcome, and Hinata returned the favor. When they were all standing side by side, Kurenai turned to face the Hokage. I respectfully ask that I be left alone with my team so that we can start our team building, Hokage. Sama. She asked with a slight bow, and the Sandaime smiled warmly and nodded. You can, of course. Please, Naruto, take care of her, and please, Hinata, get better quickly, he said with a serious expression. Naruto appeared perplexed, and his confusion increased when he noticed Hinata's slight blush. Did I overlook anything? He inquired, causing the elderly Hokage to laugh once more. Naruto.kun, nothing at all. As he left the room, he tipped his big hat and said, Have a good day. Kurenai looked at her team and noticed that the female had instantly taken on a stoic exterior. She scowled to herself, wondering how she could suddenly go from being so shy around Naruto and the Sandaime to being classic Hyuga. She would have to investigate. Now then, Kurenai said, taking a seat on the bed across from Hinata, we'll start with some basic facts about yourselves because I know that the three of you know each other quite well, but I don't. She smiled and said, your likes, dislikes, hobbies, goals, dreams. That sort of thing. After getting a nod from her three new students, she continued, I'll begin here. You can call me Yuhi Kurenai. I like dancing and my friend Anko, but I don't like people who do things the easy way. I enjoy training and taking care of my garden, and I hope to one day become the strongest genjutsu user in the shinobi world and have a family. She pointed to Naruto, who grinned broadly and scratched the back of his head. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like Hinata, Chan and ramen. The brunette abruptly coughed and ducked her head under the covers to cover her blush. And I detest people who make fun of other people without cause. My dream is to become the greatest Hokage ever, and I suppose my only pastime is training. Kurenai looked at the woman by his side who had recovered from her itchy throat, and nodded, smiling warmly at the blonde, who was well known for wanting to be Hokage, which she considered ideal motivation for training. The woman said, My name is Hyuga Hinata. Kurenai saw Naruto frown a little but remained silent, thinking, oh, I most definitely have to look into this. I like cinnamon buns and training. And NN Naruto. K.Kun. She stammered, blushing bright red, then composed herself and went on as if the episode had never occurred. I dislike those who put others down for things beyond their control, she said. In order to purge my clan of its animosity, I hope to one day bring the Hyuga main and branch houses together. I really hope she doesn't turn out to be as dull as some of the other infatuated girls who come through the academy. The quality of kunoichi has really dulled these past few years. Kurenai speculated about another of the girl's dreams after noticing the young girl look at Naruto while discreetly pressing her index fingers together. My name is Aburame Shino, she said, nodding her head in the direction of Shino, who repositioned his glasses higher on his nose. I enjoy caring for the plants that insects like and researching insects. I don't like people with closed minds and those who make unfair judgments about other people. Why? With a startled expression on his face, Naruto asked, almost taking Shino by surprise. Shino adjusted his glasses once more and said, because, those who are outside the Aburame clan usually look down at us in disgust due to our bodies containing our hives. Naruto nodded, letting the boy continue. One day, I hope to find a new insect species that can help lower field casualties. I guess it's some kind of medicinal insect. Why? When Naruto's voice rang again, Shino turned to face him and raised one eyebrow. Kurenai hardly managed to contain her laughter at her team's antics. Because we can transfer the chakra we drain from our opponents to ourselves or our allies if we have sufficient control over our Kakaichu. An Aburame on the team could keep the others in fighting condition for a lot longer if you combine that with insects that can help repair damaged muscles and tissue. It also addresses the issue that medical personnel have when they need time and cover to provide first aid during a fight, which is rarely done. Shino gave him a nod before turning to their sensei, and Naruto nodded once more, giving his companion the thumbs up. Kurenai grinned at the three of them and said, Great, I think we'll all get along great. However, our first training session will not take place for 3 days because Hinata needs to rest for another day or two. I take it that both of you can train alone? Kurenai asked the two boys, and Naruto gave her the thumbs up and Shino nodded. After all, Kurenai. Sensei, training is my pastime, he said brightly, and she gave him a smile. The two of you are to train yourselves over the next few days while Hinata heals, Kurenai said, adding, of course, Naruto. Remember to meet at Training Ground 6 at 8 AM in 3 days? She left after the three of them reacted with a collective, Hi, Sensei. Shino turned to Naruto as she left the room. Naruto-san, Shino said, catching the blonde's attention, please don't be upset when I don't join you for training because I intend to train with my clan for better control of my hive in the coming days. Naruto gave the bug user a bright smile and nodded, saying, of course Shino. I never want you to feel bad about training with your family, so don't worry about it. You know, I would train constantly with my family if I had any. Naruto turned to see Hinata staring at him sorrowfully, deep in thought, while Shino nodded and waved as he departed as well. She was startled out of her reverie when he waved his hand in front of her face. Hello, Earth to Hinata, Chan. Naruto scowled a little as Hinata blushed and ducked her head, muttering something like an apology. Hinata. Chan, why did you look so depressed? Naruto asked, glancing at the hand he had left behind while speaking with Shino. Perhaps he ought to pick it up once more. Hinata said with a hint of melancholy, IJ. Just. Naruto sat on the edge of her bed, concurring with his earlier idea, and took her hand in his, causing her to flush at the touch but still squeezing the appendage. ITH. Think it's you. You. Unfair. That UD. Didn't get to grow up with an F. Family. She stated with tears in her eyes. You should be able to train with them, and make them proud. When Naruto removed his mask of happiness, his eyes darkened a little. Hinata was one of a few people Naruto let see his actual emotions, and there were only enough of them for him to count on one hand. He smiled sadly at her and said, I like to think that my mom and dad are watching me from the afterlife, and rooting for me, you know. Thank you, Hinata-chan, for saying that. I believe they would be proud of me if they could see how hard I work. Since I'm not acquainted with them, perhaps they wouldn't. They would be proud of you, Naruto-kun. Hinata's words were delivered with such conviction that Naruto's eyes blazed with a wild passion that, when she saw him staring into hers in awe, dulled considerably and was replaced by shyness, though it wasn't entirely extinguished. Although she spoke a little more quietly, the message was clear. They would be versus v. Very proud of the person you've become. Hinata froze, her face turning red as if someone had painted it, and Naruto leaned forward to embrace the girl tightly. The voice was full of emotion as Naruto said, Thank you, Hinata-chan. Hinata felt her arms encircle him, holding his as tightly as he held hers. I'm hugging Naruto-kun. She thought, pressing her face against his shoulder. She breathed in his scent and was overcome. It was unquestionably stronger coming from the source than the discarded clothes she sometimes grabbed. Wiping his eyes on his sleeve, Naruto broke up with her, much to her dismay. I'm really glad to have someone like you in my life, Hinata-chan. You know, Hinata felt her heart squeeze against her body as it grew to enormous sizes with the sheer amount of love she felt for the blonde at that precise moment. He said, giving her a soft, heartfelt smile. She pulled at his sleeve, and he snatched her back into his embrace, and she flushed less, clinging to him as tightly as she could. As she fell asleep clutching the boy of her dreams, she thought, I'm so lucky to have you with me as well, Naruto-kun. I hope that one day, you cherish me in the same way I do you. Naruto-kun. I love you. The day had finally arrived for them to begin their training, and Naruto was feeling more energized than ever. He and Hinata were standing in the clearing of Training Ground 3, where Hinata was sitting quietly meditating on the ground while Naruto fidgeted with everything he had on hand. He had been about to begin throwing shuriken at individual leaves on the surrounding trees when Shino entered the clearing. Eyeing Naruto's slightly crazed eyes and the fact that he had been preparing to use his shuriken to destroy the surrounding foliage, he said, Good morning Hinata-san. Naruto-san. I take it something annoys you, Naruto-san. Something that seemed to happen around Shino immediately sparked Naruto's curiosity. Why do you say that? Shino should have known the blonde would demand an explanation right away. He should really start expecting the question. Why? Shino rolled his eyes, the action concealed behind his sunglasses. Because your constant movement of your appendages indicates that you are anxious, and you were about to waste all of your tools by throwing them into the forest. With a flash of insight in his eyes, Naruto paused to process what Shino had said. Oh, yeah, I suppose I'm just very excited to get started on today's training. Kurenai Sensei is supposed to be extremely strong, after all, she is. Since Tsunade herself, one of the youngest kunoichi to reach Jonin. A voice that sounded uncannily familiar to Naruto and Hinata made Shino wince a little because he wasn't the one who heard it the last time. It was a little unsettling. The leading genjutsu expert in Konohagakure. The only person to live with every part of their body intact after stealing one of Anko's dango sticks? Hey, that last one is strange, don't you think? And where are you? This surrounding voice thing is weird too, Wyken, yelled Naruto. Naruto froze when he felt cold steel against his throat, and as he turned his head slightly, he noticed Kurenai standing behind him, holding her kunai in a reverse grip, and he believed he saw a blue head of hair. Lesson 1, Naruto, Kurenai stated clearly, detecting and dispelling enemy genjutsu. She looked over her shoulder at the girl with the middle of her palm resting over her spine, thinking, this girl is fast. Not only did she dispel the illusion that I placed on them, she was on me less than a second after I was in position to take Naruto out. I guess she isn't one of those lovelorn academy fools, Kurenai thought, grinning, as her devotion undoubtedly seemed to be a powerful tool. Hearing this, Naruto went pale, finding some comfort in the knowledge that Hinata would be able to break free from the illusions, if nothing else. I assume your Kakaichu helped you break the genjutsu, Shino. I expected as much, Kurenai said, observing the stoic boy nod. In case you were ever caught without your hive at full strength, I want you to practice doing it on your own. Do you understand? The boy nodded once more. Naruto, you had your defenses down the entire time, and you failed to notice the genjutsu, which I pointed out to those who were aware of the signs. Making that decision is not a smart one. Sorry, Kurenai. Sensei, but I've had to watch behind my back my entire life, she said, and Naruto's eyes darkened. I prefer to believe that when I'm with my loved ones, I can relax a little bit. Each student comes from a different path of life, and some, like Naruto, had very, very dark paths. She thought, grimacing. Shit. Kurenai slapped herself inwardly, having spent the entire night and morning planning her speeches, her actions, and how she would take command of her very first genin team. You're correct, Naruto. She bowed slightly to him and said, I'm very sorry to have hit that certain nerve. Naruto was surprised because he wasn't used to hearing such heartfelt apologies from anyone other than Hinata. It's okay, Sensei. But I understand what you're saying, and I'll try to be more aware, Naruto said, scratching the back of his head. But what are the telltale signs of genjutsu once more? Before Hinata Chan began forcing me to attend those lectures, I believe that was one of the things I slept through. The girl had taken a step back and observed the exchange between the two, closely examining Kurenai's actions. A bed appeared next to the chibi inner Hinata, who was suddenly wearing something much more revealing. Not like that Naruto-kun. No, like this. If you break the illusion, you get an R. Reward. EHE. EE. Inner Hinata said, nodding and drawing on a sign before revealing a bright red 8 on it. I'll have to help Naruto-kun with genjutsu lessons. Lessons. With Naruto-kun. Okay. So notice the lack of minute detail, or lack of familiar sounds. That'll make it much more difficult to spot genjutsu in enemy territory. I wonder how easy it is for Hinata to figure out that stuff, Naruto said, nodding as Kurenai concluded her lecture. Naruto blinked as he looked over and saw Hinata staring blankly into the forest with a strange smile on her face and a steady stream of blood dripping from one of her nostrils. With a drop of sweat forming on his head, he concluded, genjutsu is weird. With his eyes darting around the strange clearing he was in, Naruto wiped the perspiration from his forehead quickly. Just two large trees, a hole in that one, 4 clouds above, shit, a squirrel, no, a log. Though many thought Naruto was dense, which he was, to be fair, he was practically a genius when it came to combat and training, and he knew that the key to victory was to remain unpredictable so that no enemy could prepare for you. He realized abruptly that he had not spotted a cloud in the sky earlier in the day because Hinata had pointed it out while absently looking into his eyes, and he had immediately blushed and looked away. It still vexed him why she did certain things, but now that she was on his team, he would have to look into her eyes, or he wouldn't be able to pair with her effectively. The clouds are the cause, Kurenai. Sensei. He yelled to no one, and then the clouds in a bush he had been unsure of abruptly disappeared from his field of vision. Kurenai stepped up and smiled proudly at Naruto, who smiled shyly and scratched the back of his head. Good job Naruto-kun. You spotted that one much quicker than the others. Well, I remembered something Hinata Chan said earlier today, so it wasn't completely me. She looked at the stoic Aburame at her side, hoping he hadn't heard, and to her relief he appeared to be focusing hard on just balancing on the water. Said Brunette blushed and ducked her head as she continued to perform squats on the river that cut through the training ground. It had been about 2 weeks since they had formed Team 8, and Kurenai had quickly put them through various exercises to determine their strengths and weaknesses. While Naruto had godly stamina and chakra reserves, which would make him a ninjutsu powerhouse given he had a solid repertoire of different techniques, Kurenai refused to teach him a single new jutsu until he could at least dispel some minor illusions common to Chunin in a fairly short amount of time. After all, Naruto's strength, while large, was easily countered by his weakness of genjutsu, which was a very large weakness in Kurenai's opinion. After all, she had demonstrated it the first day she met them. If an enemy skilled in genjutsu weaves you into their jutsu and you can't break free, all the strength you possess means nothing if you get a kunai jabbed into your skull. As such, she had been drilling him daily in breaking her genjutsu, and while progress was slow, unbearably slow, he was slowly moving forward. He had taken it upon himself to continue training himself after the team sessions so as to not fall behind, and Kurenai admired his dedication. That was why she had planned a little surprise for her team today. Come on over here, you two. Now, the three of you have really taken to the training I've given you with few complaints, Kurenai said, and Hinata and Shino complied, jogging lightly across the water's surface to join Naruto in front of their sensei. And despite those few hiccups, I feel a reward is in order for you guys, she said, casting a sour glance at Naruto, who rubbed the back of his head anxiously. Ah yes. What are we getting? I always wanted a. Kurenai's trained eyes noticed the corner of Hinata's mouth twitch as if she wanted to smile at the exclamation but refrained from doing so. Naruto asked, looking sheepish. As Kurenai dug through her pouch, she thought, I really need to crack that girl's shell. The report said that she was subjected to Itachi's special genjutsu, Tsukuyomi. I should probably start with that. Kurenai pulled herself out of her reverie and produced 3 slips of paper while gazing expectantly at her genin team. Shino and Hinata's eyebrows raised in surprise, as they were obviously not expecting this. Naruto, however. What are those in hell? Squinting at the tiny papers, he questioned, is it some sort of amazing technique on a tiny scroll? Alternatively, are they extremely lethal stealth paper bombs? No, Naruto, these are, none of those things, Kurenai said coldly. Even so, your initial guess was somewhat closer to the end objective of this. Here, each of you take one. As her team reached out to grab a slip of paper, Kurenai got herself into lecture mode. Now, these are chakra paper. They reveal your innate chakra affinity once you channel chakra into them. Fire, earth, water, lightning, and wind are the elements that need to be managed. The majority of Konoha shinobi are drawn to fire, so be ready for that. Although it is uncommon, people occasionally have secondary affinities as well, so don't be upset if you don't. While it is possible to learn techniques from the other elements, it will be much more difficult and take a lot more time, she added. Having an affinity towards a certain element means that you will learn techniques of that type exponentially easier. But it's easier once you know how to shape that particular chakra. Now, she said with a supportive glance at each of them, channel chakra into your papers, and let's see what elements you got. As they put their chakra into their paper, Kurenai could only gawk at the unexpected results. Shino's paper crumbled into dust rather quickly and thoroughly, practically disintegrating in his fingers. This marked an extremely strong affinity towards earth, and complemented the Aburame style of outsmarting their opponents quite well, since his defenses would be boosted tremendously with earth jutsu on his side. Hinata's quickly grew soggy, dripping water onto the ground at her feet, before weakly scrunching inwards. A very strong primary element of water, with a weak secondary of lightning. This girl wasn't only a taijutsu powerhouse, but she had 2 elements? She could become one of the strongest kunoichi in Konoha if given the opportunity. Despite Hinata having 2 elements, Naruto's paper still surprised her the most. As soon as he channeled chakra into it, it had split down the middle. Naruto had jumped and released the paper, watching the 2 halves float to the ground. He looked at her questioningly, which she returned with a large smile. Oh, this was the perfect gift for Asuma. He always went on and on about how he would never find another wind user to pass on his techniques to, and here was one placed on her squad. Naruto grinned enthusiastically as she remarked, really, really amazing. You all have incredibly strong affinities towards your primaries, and you, Hinata, even had a secondary affinity. With pride in her voice, she remarked, this is truly a sensei's dream come true. Naruto puffed out his chest and smiled widely. Indeed, none of your teams after us will be able to compete at all, he laughed and yelled. Kurenai froze, realizing that he was correct and that she had wasted all of her luck in selecting this undeveloped talent for her first squad. To Naruto's bewilderment, Kurenai reached into her pouch once more and said, now, I have scrolls with a few basic DC rank jutsu for water, earth, and lightning. She handed the scrolls to Hinata and Shino, who gazed at her in despair. Now, Naruto, you should feel lucky that I don't have any wind scrolls, Naruto said. You must receive specialized one. On .1 training from a friend of mine, as he is the only other wind user in Konoha, in addition to the fact that it is an extremely uncommon affinity outside of wind country. Naruto, who absolutely loved learning new techniques, began to shake with excitement and a smile on his face. When Hinata saw the unbridled joy on Naruto's face, her heart began to race because this was what she had always desired, his happiness. Oh. After a few weeks. Kurenai sat down heavily in the small booth, and Enko sat down across from her right away. They were thankful for the opportunity to catch up, as it had been a long time since they had time off during the same period. All right, Kurenai-chan, tell me how you're finding the whole sensei thing, Enko said, giving her longtime friend a sadistic smile. To be honest, a lot better than I would have hoped, Kurenai laughed. They all possess some sort of talent, and even in their weak areas, they exhibit promise. Furthermore, they continue to train even when I'm not leading the class. Enko whistled softly. I haven't seen motivated rookies in a long time. What motivates them? It's not what, it's who. Kurenai grinned and shook her head in response to an internal thought. One of my students, Uzumaki Naruto. Enko looked at her curiously, and Kurenai laughed briefly. That brat? Enko said, raising an eyebrow. How? As Kurenai studied Enko's face, her expression became somewhat more serious. Enko, I know this question may seem strange, but what do you think of Naruto? He's a little brat, Enko said, raising her eyebrows even higher than before as she considered her query. On his way to Ichiraku, I once ran into him in the shopping district, and he told me that ramen was the best. PFT. Of course I told him that nothing even approaches Dango. But my Dango was insulted by that little twerp. After an hour or so of chasing him, he finally gave me the slip. Kurenai nodded, letting her smile return. So he's just a regular boy, isn't he? I guess it's as normal as a boy who doesn't love Dango can be, Enko grunted, turning away and crossing her arms. Why are you asking? After taking a quick look around, Kurenai said in a hushed voice, you are aware of his guest? Yes, I do, Enko said with a single nod and narrowed eyes. She hissed, gripping her neck absently, and if you're telling me that I would think differently of him because of something he had no control over, I'm going to seriously reconsider our friendship. That's not what I meant by that, Kurenai grimaced. Look, most people treat Naruto like dirt, and I'm trying to find him allies. That's all I wanted. I've heard that he's been working with Shino, Shikamaru, Choji, Sasuke, and Hinata for a number of years, and he deserves it for the way he motivates his team to work hard. After giving her a wary glance, Enko relaxed once more. I see. I can't say I'm shocked, though, given what has happened in the past. In any case, it's quite an accomplishment to train with all those clan heirs for so long. He seems like a significant young man. And that's just the start, Kurenai said, nodding while sipping the water their waiter had just left them. The child is capable of making shadow clones. Enko raised her eyebrows to her hairline and whistled once more, saying, shadow clones? 12? That is quite remarkable. Is 2 or 3 his limit? Kurenai grinned and said, .400. WH. What did you just say? Enko spat the water she had been drinking all over the table. With great pride, Kurenai laughed and said, yes, he can make 400 clones. And that's all at once. If he only called forth a small number of them throughout the day, I'd estimate he could create nearly 1,000. Enko blinked once, then twice. She didn't wake up until their waiter arrived and asked what they wanted, at which point she hurriedly ordered a couple sticks of dango and pushed him away. How on earth is that even possible? With a contemplative expression, Kurenai took another sip of her water. Well, I talked to Hokage Sama about it, and we have some theories. His guest is the first to contain the thing. His chakra coils would have needed to enlarge significantly when he was a baby, and they have most likely only gotten bigger over time. His heritage comes in second. At this, Enko's brows knitted. His ancestry? Is Hokage Sama aware of his parents' identities? Yes, and he refused to share that with me, despite my position as his sensei, Kurenai said, nodding angrily. Claims that Naruto needs to get stronger in order to handle the information because it is still too sensitive. Nevertheless, he claimed that the Uzumaki were a clan known for their longevity, hardiness, and unusually high chakra reserves in addition to their fuinjutsu. Enko nodded, her expression darkening. Yeah, did they not found Uzu Shiogakure? Now I recall that they were. Kurenai sadly remarked, wiped out, yes. Hokage. Sama believes that there are still some stragglers in the world, but they have either fallen or completely hidden themselves. Additionally, he maintained that there are no survivors on the other side of his heritage, leaving him all by himself. Anko shook her head sadly. She knew firsthand just how terrible that fate really was. Poor kid, and he still finds it in himself to inspire confidence in others, eh? Kurenai nodded, a smirk crawling onto her face. He even pulled off the impossible, on 2 counts. Anko raised an eyebrow for what felt like the 1000th time. How much surprises were in store for her today? Oh, do tell. Well, the first is to do with Kakashi, she said, noticing how Anko was now paying rapt attention to her. She grinned inwardly. She would have to take advantage of that crush at some point. He was on time when Naruto requested him for training. Kurenai watched as Anko took an entire 5 seconds to register her words before her mouth fell open in obvious disbelief. There's no way. Yep. Kurenai said, a self-satisfied smile on her face. Her student was really special, after all. He also refers to him as Ni-san, and I've never seen Kakashi smile that much around anyone. If Anko's mind wasn't made up before about getting acquainted with the boy, it was now. After all, anyone that could get the infamous copy ninja to be on time to anything would be the stuff of legends later in their life. Not only that, Kurenai's voice sounded, pulling Anko from her musings, but he made Asuma take his training seriously. Like, several hours of intense training, leaving you sweaty and collapsed on the ground serious. Anko held her hand up, signaling Kurenai to stop talking. Kurenai looked confused at the unspoken request, but complied nonetheless. Kurenai, Anko said, her eyes hidden by her bangs. Yes. Kurenai gave a hesitant response, feeling uneasy about her best friend's peculiar actions. With a sudden, thoughtful look, Anko's eyes met hers. How old will I be when that gaki is legal? 28? Is 16 a legal age? Kurenai watched in disbelief as she pondered the age gap between herself and the blonde. Anko. Wa. What are you? No, she shouted, causing the Tokubetsu Jonin to look at her in mild annoyance. What are you thinking? He's just a kid, sweet Kami. Anko sniffed. Well, from what you're saying, he's probably gonna be the best catch this village has seen since Kakashi himself. I got a knack for calling the lookers, and he'll grow up to be quite the hunk. That's disgusting, Kurenai said, horror evident in her voice. Hey, don't go assuming things. Anko shouted back, now aware of the eyes trained on them from around the small restaurant. She snarled, turning to face them as she released a minor amount of killing intent. What the fuck are you all looking at? Take care of yourself. The majority of the establishment's population, the civilians, immediately bowed their heads and murmured weak apologies, while the few shinobi who were aware of Anko's reputation returned to their meals in silence, giving her sly glances out of the corners of their eyes. I never said I found him attractive right now, you asshole, Anko said, sneering at Kurenai as he sat back down. He'll be attractive when he grows up, I said, adding that I could call the lookers. Kurenai. Chan, Kami, I'm not some fucking pedophile. You're right, I'm sorry, Anko. Chan, Kurenai said with a guilty looking nod. However, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting any part of him, now or later. And why is that? Does he have a higher sense of calling that he will disregard any physical needs of his own? Anko scoffed. Because I've once met someone like that, and after I wrapped my tits around his cock, he. That isn't it at all. No, no, and what did I say about sharing details about your exploits? Kurenai yelled, gesturing with her hands in front of her. What fun is it if I can't brag about it? Anko muttered as she sat back with a sigh, the excitement fading from her face. Feeling more in control of herself, Kurenai took a few gulps of her water before putting her glass down. Anyway, she said, I was saying you'll have a hard problem due to the female on my team. With her eyebrows raised, Anko remarked, oh, do you have a couple on your team? Kurenai laughed and said, no, but Hinata probably wishes that part. Very, very much. Is it biased? Startled, Anko inquired. Kurenai laughed once more and remarked, more due to lack of knowledge than lack of reciprocation. I swear, as strong and kind as Naruto is, he wouldn't know affection if it was staring him in the face, which it is, half the time. It's blushing, too. The Hinata girl's entire life seemed to be the worst possible time in this situation, and she rolled her eyes. Guys could be so unbelievably dense, often at the worst times. Why don't you move it along quickly? With a serious expression on her face, Anko inquired. As it stands, our life expectancies aren't very long. Before the Shinigami arrives to pick them up, why not give them that small measure of joy? Kurenai firmly replied, because it will happen without me in due time. He needs to recognize the differences between her and himself, and he will figure it out. He's kind of smart. Anko smiled mischievously at her and said, it seems like you need someone to step in a bit. I'd be more than happy to encourage her to express her feelings. Perhaps give the Gaki a quick back rub or a quick kiss on the cheek. Haha. I can see your face now. She had seen it before, and it was incredibly precious. She laughed at the expression of resentment and jealousy on the face of the unidentified girl. Kurenai, however, didn't laugh with her for some reason. Instead, she appeared uneasy. Kurenai's voice was a little scared as she said, I wouldn't if I were you, Anko. Chan. Anko's eyes narrowed, demanding answers. Kurenai, squirming a little, remarked, she's a special breed. She is not only a Hyuga, which means that she has a soft fist, but she is also fiercely protective of Naruto. It's frighteningly so. She shivered and tried to push the idea from her mind, saying, I know she'll be one of the strongest kunoichi this village has ever seen, but I have no doubt that you could take her if she attacked you, but the intensity of it still frightens me a bit. It wouldn't be the best way to win over the blondie, so Anko shrugged, not feeling like trying to pick a quarrel with a possessive, future girlfriend? Unknown girlfriend? HMPH. Idly cleaning her nails with a kunai that she apparently conjured out of thin air, Anko remarked dryly, sounds like you've had your hands full then. You know, you can join us for training at any point in time. Is that what you were waiting for? Kurenai smiled at Anko and said, more or less. She let out a sigh as Anko's savage smile provided the answer to her query. You should have already known that, she chuckled. The next week as the Hokage went over their mission count, Anko stood in front of him with her genin team. Let's see, .30, 31, 32, well, Kurenai, it seems you and your team have completed 33 D-rank missions this past week. Sarutobi sighed. That's quite a track record you have going. Haha, well OG.san, with teamwork like ours, plus my shadow clones, all this cleaning and moving is a piece of cake. Kurenai started to thank him, but Naruto interrupted, rubbing beneath his nose and smiling foolishly. Now, Kurenai, having pride in one's team does not necessarily call for punishment. Sarutobi laughed as he watched Kurenai pick on her student. When Naruto noticed that his sensei was beginning to back off a little, he took advantage of the opportunity to ask the question he had been dying to ask all week. Hey, OG.san, how about a mission that isn't picking up garbage? I swear, we're very strong. I can assure you that it will be easy because we even learned some elemental jutsu and other techniques. Sarutobi waited for Kurenai to turn back to Naruto, but she gave him a look that said, quite clearly, I think they're ready, it's your call and. Sarutobi said, leaning forward to ruffle the blonde's hair, I dare say that can be arranged, Naruto.kun. Naruto's smile widened exponentially as he leapt into the air, shouting his success. Kurenai smiled as she saw the other two members of her team display their own subtle signs of happiness. After all, they had all been extremely bored for the past week, and with their training being as intense as it was, having a lot of free time while Naruto's clones performed menial tasks that had no training value to them at all was annoying. They hadn't wanted to speak up, knowing that each genin was expected to perform their share of the D ranks, but they were glad Naruto had the audacity to speak up. Team 8 gazed at Sarutobi as he cleared his throat. Now, it looks like a big gang of bandits is harassing a village on the eastern edge of the Land of Fire. Although they seem to be nothing more than mercenaries, each team's sensei should deal with any low-level ninja who happens to be in their ranks. Hokage. Sama, you said, each team's, which leads me to believe that there will be another team accompanying us, said Shino, with Team 8 giving him a questioning look. You're right, Shino, Hiruzen said, nodding. Team Guy is going to be with you. Naruto looked at Hinata and saw how her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Normally he wasn't one to read people's emotions or notice little details, but Hinata was special to him. He'd known her the longest and she seemed to care the most about him, so she was his best friend and his special friend, and he would always be there for her in times of need. As Sarutobi explained some of the more trivial details of the mission, it was more stuff for their sensei anyhow. He shuffled closer to her, gently bumping his shoulder into hers. Hinata's face flushed slightly when she realized how close Naruto had come to her, and this flush deepened when he took her hand and concealed the joined appendages behind their backs. Hinata was struggling to keep up her stoic exterior as she felt his thumb caress the back of her hand while maintaining that intense, worried gaze. With a slight smile, he whispered, "That jerk won't come anywhere near you. It'll be okay, Hinata-chan." Hinata's disdain and disappointment for her cousin Neji was almost as strong as her affection for Naruto. Ever since his father's death, he had become cold and resentful towards the main branch of the clan, often attempting in earnest to hurt her during sparring sessions. Worse still was his fate mentality, which held that everyone had a certain fate and that there was nothing to divert from it. That topic had been brought up with her regarding Naruto, and she had, of course, stopped feeling sorry for her cousin. Hinata didn't often get into these kinds of moods, but when she did, it was usually very difficult to get her out of them. Fortunately, he had chosen to confide in Kurenai about the matter, and she had seemed more than happy to broach the subject with him. As a result, he had some ideas to help her get out of her rut. So keep an eye out for that. Take the remainder of today and tomorrow off since you are leaving in 2 days. Make sure you have enough rest and the right supplies for a 2-week mission. Dismissed. Naruto's mind was racing with plans for the next day as he left the tower with Hinata's hand still in his, much to the girl's amusement and embarrassment. He abruptly turned on the spot, shocking Hinata. Hinata felt her breath catch a little at his intensity, but she kept her mask up and said, "Hinata-chan." He spoke with concern in his voice. "I'm going to go get things ready for tomorrow, but be ready for me outside your compound at like noon, okay?" Hinata gave an owlish blink. "What, be ready for me tomorrow at noon?" Naruto grinned. "All right. Let's go out and do something together." Before recalling one of the special words Kurenai had mentioned would help her, he gave her the thumbs up. "Oh, and just so you know, it's just the 2 of us." Hinata blinked once more, her face rapidly becoming extremely dark. Was this a date? Was it with Naruto-kun? Was it with them? Was it just her? Midday? She would be flawless. She needed to prepare herself. As Hinata shot off, Naruto slammed backwards, leaving behind only a cloud of dust that oddly resembled her. "My goodness, she moves faster than I've ever seen her," Kurenai to herself, knowing that the wheels were set in motion by her nudge, Naruto said with awe in his voice. As she watched Naruto wave them off as he ran toward the Yamanaka flower shop, she thought, "I know I said you couldn't help, Anko, but I'm their sensei. It's my responsibility to ensure their happiness. Probably. I'm gonna think that it is, otherwise I'll just be a hypocrite." His sensei had a knowing look about her, and he could swear he saw a woman with purple hair spying on them from rooftops. And Shino was stunned because not only had nearly all of his lines and insights been ignored throughout the day, but it felt like the rest of his team was experiencing all the exciting things. Tomorrow, Naruto and Hinata were supposed to spend the day together. What does Shikamaru say all the time? Oh, right. Tough.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.